Attention. I would like to call the board meeting of the Mount View Saltos Union High School District, the Board of Trustees, to order at 7:08 p.m. Hi, everybody. I will say that we're reconvening from closed session, and the first thing is call to order, which I just did, and we are now going to do Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll do roll call. Ready? Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Mark. Oh.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Okay, roll call will note that 4 trustees are here in person and our other trustees here by Zoom. Or I think that's what we're on Zoom. And then our 2 student reps, Riley and Ava, are also here. Okay. Next, 7.1, I would call for a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have such a motion? So moved. Clara and Debbie seconds that motion. Board, is there any discussion? Otherwise, Riley, what do you think? Ava? I approve. Okay, board, all in favor, say aye. 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 And that was all of us, so that is a 5-0. Okay, report out on action taken in closed session. We have nothing to say at this time. Next is 9.1 is we have a resolution declaring June, except for this should be 2022, maybe June 2022, to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer Pride Month. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I move adoption of resolution 21/22-46.
And then Fiona seconds. Dr. Meyer, would you like to read that resolution?
I would be happy to. Thank you. This is a resolution declaring June 2022 to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer Pride Month. Whereas it is policy of the Mountain View Los Altos High School District that all persons, including those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, have an equal and non-discriminatory opportunity to a quality public education experience. And whereas many lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer youth and youth perceived to belong to these groups still face harassment and physical violence in communities. And whereas the 2018 California Healthy Kids Survey reported that 46% of LGBTQ youth have seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months, and that is compared to 15% of non-LGBTQ youth. And the 2018 Human Rights Campaign Youth Report found that just 1 accepting adult can reduce the risk of suicide risk among LGBTQ young people by 40%. And whereas the Mountain View Los Altos School Board of Trustees celebrates, values, and welcomes diversity of our student body, our teachers, our staff, and our administrators, including the diversity of sexual orientation and identity in our community. And whereas the Mountain View Los Altos High School Board of Trustees has made a commitment to achieving and fostering diversity and acceptance in our staff, our school population, and in our curriculum. And whereas Mountain View Los Altos School District's adopted curriculum materials comply with the FAIR Act, ensuring all groups, including LGBTQ plus community, are represented fairly and accurately. And whereas the Mountain View Los Altos High School Board of Trustees wishes to note the variety of celebrations recognizing LGBTQ plus Pride Month around the nation and throughout the state of California during the month of June. So therefore be it resolved that the Mountain View Los Altos High School Board of Trustees and the Mountain View Los Altos High School District proclaim June 22nd Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Pride Month, And we'll fly a rainbow flag at each school and facility within the MVLA school district throughout the month of June, and actually every day, to signify our support for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer plus community.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer.
Thank
Is
you.
there any comments before we take the vote on this? We've already made the motion. No? Riley? I agree. Hava? I agree. Board, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's a 5-0 vote. And it's so important to recognize all the different groups that are part of our community and part of our student population, and the successes they had and also the challenges they have, and that we want to support them in both. So we'll move on to reports. Presentation on fentanyl drug use.
Yes, thank you. I would like to say that certainly as part of the opioid epidemic and in the wake of our sad loss at Los Altos High School this year, we have redoubled our efforts to make sure that we have information available to the community. So we're very fortunate this evening that we have the County Substance Use Prevention Department here to present an overview of fentanyl, its dangers, and how Narcan can save a life. And certainly fentanyl is an extremely potent, dangerous narcotic analgesic, and fentanyl is affecting so many of our students, K-12 around the nation. So with that, Terry, if you wouldn't mind introducing our guest.
I don't think Angela is here
Okay.
because thought this was going under business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we
Okay.
gave her more of like a 7:30 timeline as we had to do all of our reports.
Okay, well then perhaps we will press pause. And then when Anjanette from the County Substance Abuse Task Force comes, we will certainly have that ready to go.
Is that all right with everyone? Board, yes? All right,
Okay, thank you.
we'll move
I
that
look
down.
forward to it.
Okay, so then we'll move to board member reports. Board, Bill, over there
Yes.
on the screen, do you have anything? And board reports?
Yes, there is one thing I wanted to mention. We all received an email from several people, but in particular an epidemiologist who is also a bioethicist. And it was urging us to re-implement the mask mandate indoors. And I was going to ask Dr. Meyer whether we can give serious thought to that, because I see that the numbers today, the rolling day 7-day average, was in the 950s, I think, and it's clearly on the verge of breaking 1,000. So we may be in a very dangerous situation again. And I wonder whether, once again, we should take the lead as we did way back 2 years ago in going away for a little bit and do something about that.
Just to give you a sense of what that number 950 would represent, if you think back a year and a half, so basically December of 2020, January 21, December 2020, that's what those numbers were around. Was close to about that. Just to kind of go back, just to kind of think what that number, because the number sometimes doesn't know, you can kind of tell what the number means, but if you go back, that's what happened. So
Certainly we were at home. Well, to that point, I will share that we're definitely talking about this hour by hour, day by day, and appreciate the comments about giving this serious thought, and know that we are. But to this specific point, we certainly will take this back for discussion as early as tomorrow morning with our cabinet, Dr. Felice. And then also just generally, we have 3 weeks and we want to participate as fully as possible. Certainly, I know there are a lot of reasons why both are difficult, And we're going through each of those reasons right now. But we certainly will stay in conversation with this board and with the community on this topic.
And the county, right? That's what we need to get guidance from the county.
We've been following the guidance of the county.
Right.
We do have, we are also,
Beg Dr. Dewan, they're gonna adhere to whatever comes down from higher.
Right, so do we know if anything is coming down?
no, not at this time. We're also working with all of the superintendents in our region. And, you know, the majority, 90% are currently doing what we're doing, but we're still looking at it through the data lens. And we have been following the county precisely, and I don't anticipate a change there, but you know, we're working with all of these and looking at our individual numbers as well, our district numbers. So we'll continue to have this very serious conversation. If it helps us get through and it's necessary, we want to do what's best to protect students. It's a tough one. And staff. Yes,
Anyone else
and
have
families.
a board report? No, I mean, Sanjay, you've already said what you're gonna say. You don't have anything else to add?
No.
Okay, all right. Debbie?
I think the practices were really nice last week,
Mhm.
and classified shadowing was very entertaining. So thank you.
Yes, and we've had a lot of award ceremonies, Latinx awards and senior awards and some more at the different schools coming up. So everyone's getting excited for graduation. So we're on the final slide to the end. All right, now we have student board member reports. Let's see. I don't remember who went first last time. Let's have you go first this time, Riley.
Okay. In regards to activities, our student community leaders class is putting on Wellness Week right now, where they're emphasizing mental health, and we have daily dress-up days and activities. And then near the end of the week, they're bringing back the famous animal zoo kind of thing, where the students have the opportunity to de-stress with animals since finals is coming up, and I know a lot of students are stressed out about that. ASB finished their dodgeball tournament last Friday with RAFO dodging balls since 2004, took the victory, winning the tournament, beating the senior boys in the final, and also winning the team name title. Our jazz dance class had their dance show 2 weeks ago, and our advanced scientific investigation class had their fair in the quad last Friday, where all the students showcased their really impressive presentations and all the hard work they've been doing this year. We had our senior awards night last week, and I'm actually gonna shout out Romeo because he's here. He won 13 awards, and it was really amazing to see all the seniors getting recognized. In regards to sports, we had Jade and Jen who made it to NorCal for badminton. We had signing day a couple weeks ago where 11 seniors are continuing to do athletics in college. And I'm not biased, but tracks won CCS finals, the boys. They won all of CCS and the girls placed second in CCS. And there were 4 individual champions, 2 school records are broken, and there are about 10 athletes moving on to the state meet this weekend. We had prom this Saturday, Los Altos, and I actually got to go to both, which was super cool. And they're both very different experiences. I'm a little biased. I thought Los Altos was a little better, but they're both really cool to see everyone together, kind of a final hurrah for a lot of the seniors. And I know it definitely did not help COVID, but I think it was still cool that we were able to have that. And then I'm also going to mention Sadie because she's here and she's the board member or my position next year. And so, yes. And Alba and I did separate surveys, but we had a quick end of the year survey. And what I kind of gathered was a lot of students felt like they feel they're in a good place right now. And a lot of them what they wanted to say to the board was, although they didn't agree with all the decisions, they really felt like you guys did your best in regards to COVID this year and last year, and they're really grateful with where we are at. And yeah, a lot of the students just said they think that the board handled COVID very positively. They feel safe. And one student said, I feel like I can go back to everything that COVID took away from me. And so that was really awesome to see. And one more thing I just want to mention is I know this is my last meeting, so I'm really grateful for the last 2 years. And I feel like I got to grow as a person, and I learned a lot about how everything works and about who I am. And so I just want to say I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be on the board.
So there's a lot going on at Mountain View and Los Altos right now as the end of the year is approaching. Last week we had our Asb Banquet, which was really cool to have it in person. We had lots of awards and speeches, and a lot of other communities at Mountain View are having their end of the year banquets right now, like track and ambassadors. We also had prom, not this weekend, but the weekend before. Like Riley said, it was great to see everyone together and having fun. Unfortunately, that did become a source of COVID for Mountain View, but I think slowly we're getting through it. This week is our last week of school for our seniors, and they have awards night this Wednesday. We also had our end of the year rally last week. We had performances from our Japanese class, dance spectrum, and our Mountain View staff did a dance, which was really cute. And we had a bunch of competitions between the classes as well. Our boys volleyball team got second overall in NorCal over the weekend, which was really impressive. And then we also have what we call May Play Day this Thursday, which is like a prep for freshman orientation, training all of our pod leaders through the ambassadors program to prepare them for what will happen towards the end of the summer. And we also had our last congressional meeting, which, like Riley said, I took a feedback survey. I didn't get a ton of like appropriate comments and things that could be used and that were beneficial, but a couple things that I got were that free lunches were a really big positive this year. Definitely a couple people said this. They help out a lot of people, and a lot of classmates depend on free lunches, so that's definitely positive from this year. We had some comments on feeling like teachers needed to be reviewed more often. A comment about how the new tutorial schedule, having tutorial twice a week, was really beneficial for students. Someone said that the new BAL schedule in the longer periods was not as helpful for them because it was harder to learn all the curriculum and the classes were really hard. So it's, really long. So it's harder to focus just for this person. And then another pro was the increased ASB budget, but people felt like we needed more affordable dance prices or prices for events or a way for students to be able to afford those things. Oh yeah.
I have a question on that. PTSA has for years tried to make sure that every student was able to go to anything that they wanted to go to. If you have thoughts, and I can catch you offline or later, but if you have thoughts on how better to publicize those avenues to make sure that students know how to access them, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think definitely we should put it out there that those resources are available. I think people don't know. So yeah.
Thank you, Alba. Any other questions? I'm glad all these events have been fun so far, and hopefully the more fun ones are coming. All right, now we have students of the month. Let's stick with you, Alba, and let you go first with your Mountain View student. Precious.
Paper handouts if you could just do that.
I can use my
Just one.
Mountain View High School is proud to recognize Precious Nayarko as our May 2022 Student of the Month. Precious is a current junior at Mountain View who is involved in activities including ASB, varsity cheerleading, Black Student Union, and Me Too Club, and is described as committed, hardworking, and determined to help others. Precious has been on the varsity cheerleading team since her sophomore year and enjoys hyping up the crowd and her teammates during sporting events. She is also on the diversity committee of MVHS student government. Through this committee, she has founded the idea of having free spirit gear in the library during Spirit Weeks, as well as helped plan the cultural fashion show. Precious describes her biggest accomplishment as serving as a voice in ASB for underrepresented groups on campus. She prioritizes listening to ways our school can be improved and tirelessly works on implementing them within the Diversity Committee. This year, Precious was the Public Relations Officer for Black Student Union. Through this role, she has increased participation in the club and worked on ensuring that Black students on campus feel that there is a community for them. Next year, she is excited to serve as the president of Black Student Union, as well as the president of Me Too Club, where she advocates for sexual assault awareness within our community. Outside of school, Precious enjoys spending her summers with Olympico, a nonprofit organization that focuses on providing a hands-on STEAM program for low-income kindergarten through 5th grade students. This summer, she will be a lead teacher's assistant for the 4th grade and a counselor for Spartan Sports Camp. Precious is also a student in AVID, and her favorite classes are Honors American Literature and AP US History. Looking towards the future, she hopes to work in education and eventually become a superintendent. Congratulations, Precious.
Or do we have some questions?
Well, I think, first of all, I think Dr. Meyer should ask, you know.
Yeah. Are you lucky?
I do have a
Yeah.
question. So Precious, what would you do if you were superintendent? What would be the first thing you would do?
I'd probably just spend the day on campus getting to know students, walking around classes, just seeing if there's anything that can be improved and what's good about the school so far.
Great answer.
She's
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other people want to ask?
Sure, I got a question.
Precious.
So I was really happy to see a couple of your favorite classes, Honors American Lit, US History. I love those subjects too. Do you have for literature, do you have a favorite author or book that you?
Stealing my question.
Did you have a question? No,
Stealing my
sorry.
question. Go ahead. That's okay. Go ahead. Now,
Maybe you and I
I
have the
won't ask
same,
it
but-
twice. Go ahead.
I'd say this year my favorite author is Richard Wright. I've read 2 of his books for like our research paper, and he's a really great author.
What about him did you like?
I think the way he's able to like express like the characters' feelings through his writing, and like you really just feel in tune with them as you're reading them.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I assume you're using him for your ASP.
Sorry.
I assume you're using him for your ASP.
Yes. We finally finished that work, so we're on to our last unit.
I did finally, oh, my daughter was laughing today saying that she was like 2 months late. She said, it's really loose. It's a loose deadline.
Any other questions for Precious? No, Bill? I don't see Bill over there.
Oh, we lost them.
I think he's hiding behind the screen. Anyway, we want that logo up though. Bill, do you have a question for Precious?
Not right.
No, we can't hear you.
Muted.
Okay, Phil, you're muted, so we're gonna move on. Okay, Precious, we have a certificate for you to recognize you for this moment of being the student of the month. And we're gonna have a photo op here with you. Precious, do you have some family here that would like to be in the picture with you?
Yes.
I would say this is a family. And here you can hold the certificate.
All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Okay, thank you.
Cameras everywhere.
Okay, now Riley, would you like to present? You pronounce Alicia?
Alyssa.
Alyssa, okay, Alyssa.
Los Altos High School is privileged to recognize Alyssa Manchi as our May Student of the Month. It is an honor to recognize all of her accomplishments at Los Altos High School. Alyssa is involved in an array of activities at Los Santos High School and within the community. At the school, she is on the varsity field hockey team. She loves the close-knit atmosphere of the girls, and her favorite memory on the team has been taking an overnight trip to Monterey. On top of field hockey, Alyssa is involved in martial arts outside of school. She competes nationally and internationally with an upcoming tournament in Las Vegas. She hopes to continue with both sports after she graduates high school. On the academic side, Alyssa is in the advanced scientific investigation class, where she enjoys the independent, project-based course and the freedom to learn what she is interested in. She is researching how to stop anaphylaxis from occurring when people have allergic reactions. And in ASI, she is working on creating a drug to fix that. Alyssa has had many achievements at the Synopsis Science Fair in Silicon Valley earlier this year, where she placed second in the Excellence in Chemistry category and second overall in the whole fair. She was able to move on to the State Science Fair, where she showcased her impressive work and research. In addition, Alyssa is a tutor for the high school. She mainly tutors in math, science, and English, supporting her fellow students. Alyssa is also part of the Passion Project, a club at school and an organization outside of it. She is one of 2 students in charge of the program, where there are over 1,000 kids involved and 50 high school leaders. They teach classes to younger kids, mainly fun extracurricular classes involving painting, reading, sports, and many more. They also run summer camps, providing a space for many kids to find their passions and have the opportunity to have fun. Alyssa enjoys hiking, reading, watching movies, and hanging out with her family and friends in her free time. Congratulations, Alyssa Manchi, for receiving May Student of the Month and for all of your success and dedication to give back to your community and school. We can't wait to see all of your extraordinary accomplishments coming your way in the near future.
Have questions for
have any free time.
No.
But I kind of wanted to know how you got into martial arts, because I think that's a really good thing for anybody to have.
Yeah. Well, I started in like 5th grade and I was really shy and I didn't have much going on. And so my parents thought it would be a good idea to like have me learn how to defend myself and get more confidence. And so I've just stuck with that all the way through high school and I really like it.
Good. And do you think it's helped you then?
Yeah, I think it's helped me learn like more about myself and like my capabilities and also grow like my confidence and not just like my individual ability to, know what I'm capable of, but also working with my other team members and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
other people have questions?
I was just going to ask, are you going to stay with ASI for a second year?
Yeah.
Senior year and continue
Yeah.
research?
Yeah.
That's great.
I have a silly question. I have a son who teaches high school chemistry, but then my dad was an engineer. What's your favorite element?
Probably carbon because it's like the easiest to work with, I feel like.
Mhm. See, nice answer. Mine's beryllium or titanium, just so you know. Anybody else have another question? Well, we have a certificate for you, and we would like to have a photo op with you. And do you have family here with you? Yeah. Okay, we'll have a photo with everybody.
Ready, 3, 2, 1.
Congratulations.
All right.
Now, since, as Riley said, she's leaving us, and this is the last board meeting of the year at which the student board members are here, And they've done their last duty, if you will, of presenting the students of the month. Dr. Meyer has a little presentation.
Thank you.
Presents instead of presentation.
Thank you.
Presentation of the presents.
I'll say just a couple.
I still use the bathroom.
Do you? Good. Okay.
Mhm. Woohoo.
Oh, thank
Woohoo.
you.
Always a hit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Meyer, would you stand
Put a
and
bit
bring
on
up? Okay. Right. 1, 2, 3, smile. There you go. Right. Yeah. And I said in my comments that you've been so honest and straightforward with us, just saying how it is or how you see it, and giving us ideas of things you thought you should see differently, or how the students felt about things. And we really have heard you, and we appreciate it.
I just want to say thank you to both of you. Ava came in very quietly, observing, and such a great team, because you really brought a different component. You added a student of the month for our students with disabilities, and that will be something that will last, and it's very much appreciated. And we look forward to having you here next year. And Riley, I wrote this in your card, but what I saw and you mentioned is that you went from really coming in and being quiet and checking things out to really being a strong leader on this board team. And both of you during the pandemic, and Riley, you really gave voice to the students in a way that when students weren't here was very difficult and very much appreciated. And I look forward to seeing what you're going to do, because I know you're going to do great things. So congratulations, and good to see you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it's a commitment, by the way, to come to these meetings all the time, and follow all the things and learn about the board process. So really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Sanjay?
if I could just say thank you. It's been looking forward to next year as well. So Riley, I think you deserve an award because you survived 3 administration from what I understand. My present year, Fiona, and now Catherine. So that's, I think, the most anybody has survived. So thank you very much for being here. I think, as Dr. Meyer said, you were a strong voice for the students, and we appreciate that. I appreciate it very much, especially during my presidential year, because that was the first year we wanted to distance learning, and so having you provide kind of the point of view of what students were going through really helped us kind of think about what was happening in our district and how students were being affected by everything that was going on. So really appreciate your voice on all during all those times. So thank you very much.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, and we wish you well, both of you, of course, but and you as you go on off to college and so on.
Thank you.
Dr. Meyer, would you like to go back to 10, or would you want to do your superintendent report first?
I can do it very quickly.
Okay.
And I look forward to 10.
Okay, we're going to have the superintendent report, and then we're going to go back to the fentanyl report.
All right. Well, briefly, I know we have a lot of interesting things to hear tonight, but I do want to highlight some things that have been going on. This is our Team Avid, our seniors who had their senior awards, and I see fingers pointing. I feel like, Romeo, I know you since you had so many awards the other night, and congratulations. But here we open up with that. Whoops. Also wanted to share, we're continuing with academic excellence, equity, and engagement, and there is our student of the month last month. Our thank yous that we've had for our staff have really been, came back with vigor, and we loved that part of what we do. And you can see here our staff thank you breakfast with some highlighted photos, some famous board members there and staff members and foundation members. So it was really nice to be back together again. And then you can also see at Los Altos, we had Debbie, you were there twice, and just a wonderful time to get together and to celebrate really the month of the teacher and CSEA. Also wanted to share, as part of shadowing, we all had an opportunity to shadow classified employees. And another picture, Debbie, who really gave it her all and worked very hard. And
300 main bathrooms are really clean.
yes, yes, she worked very hard scrubbing and cleaning and mopping, and really important work. And our, you know, our campuses are so clean, and it doesn't happen by accident. So we're very grateful to our classified school employees who really are the backbone of what we do. Oh goodness, some of us had easier assignments, and that's, I didn't get to veto that picture, but you can see here supervision, shadowing Julie at Los Altos High School. She knows every student on campus. She is really someone that students can talk to. I'm going to skip through this though. Students can talk to, and just a great opportunity to see all the good work that she does. One of the highlights, and it's kind of nice to have something fun to enjoy at the end of the year. Los Altos High School had their 15th year of dodgeball, and the you know, certainly the week of you know, with the MCs and the student teams, and as mentioned by Riley, the staff, they were very determined, and they did take the championship. And we have Mr. Chaffee here, who is one of the organizers, consoling the second place team here. You can see that consolation grin. And then also on the right, Kiernan Raffo, I think, was the clincher who caught the, they said it was 400 miles per hour. That might be an exaggeration. The last throw that really clinched it for the staff, and just a wonderful time on that campus. I think Mountain View might need to start their own. I think that would do a lot for school spirit. It's always fun. Last week, Freestyle had their end of year exhibit, and just a snapshot of the beautiful artwork that they do, and they create the project start to finish. They advertise for it, they create the product, and really just such impressive, extremely professional work. And that exhibition was held at the Computer Science Museum in Mountain View, and I can't say enough about how amazing it was. Also, just I've said this a few times, but the challenge team champion youth, you can see here Sydney Fung, president of the ambassadors, Lauren Camarillo, the teacher for the ambassadors, and they took the Santa Clara County School Boards Association Hoffman Award. And you can see that was the Hoffman team there that night, and our own Fiona Walters, president of the Santa Clara County School Boards Association. And so I think now you handed the baton off to the next.
Almost,
couple months ago, yes, from Sunnyvale, is that correct?
right.
Yes. Okay, so we're very grateful to have Santa Clara School Board leadership on our own board, and you can see Sydney there on the right. Also, end of year performances, dance spectrum. I mean, really, that looks like that commercial for the San Francisco performances. Just beautiful job done. Thank you to Lauren at Mountain View High School. And then our senior awards. I think that's right. Riley gets in our pictures. We like Riley, so we put, but she certainly won Athlete of the Year and was recognized also for scholarship. And then so many of our students there receiving awards on senior awards night. And then our robotics team as well. Both Mountain View and Los Altos have strong robotics teams. And here they are in Arizona. And, you know, we look forward to seeing them both continue to create and take those championships. Alta Vista High School had a recognition in Long Beach, and here you can see their staff. Bill Pierce is on his victory lap as principal, well-deserved, and here with his team as they won the Model Continuation High School award. And you can see they really look great there, all dressed up for that formal event. And then just a reminder, this will be available on our website, our graduations. You can find all of that information, and it's coming soon and coming, you know, certainly looking forward to that. And in addition to the presentation that we'll have this evening, we are also having on May 31st at the Spartan Theater information on fentanyl. And, you know, we will have Lieutenant Frank St. Clair, who works in the substance abuse unit, as well as James Guevara and Guillermo de Lira from MVPD, and they will speak about certainly overview and information about the fentanyl crisis. And then lastly, signing day on both campuses. Los Altos had theirs just recently, and we look forward to following all of our students and watching them do great things. So that concludes my superintendent report.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Question?
Will the fentanyl presentation, Dr. Meyer, be recorded and available afterwards? I know it's being live streamed. It is also being recorded.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Meyer, do you want to go back to 10.1, tonight's presentation on fentanyl?
Yes, and I'd ask Terry Fott if you could help us introduce, please.
Sure, absolutely.
So I would like to welcome Anjanette DeVito from the County Substance Use Prevention Department. Anjanita is a clinical nurse. She works with our medication-assisted treatment program. She regularly delivers Narcan trainings and gives high-level overviews of fentanyl. And we have invited her here tonight to do just that, give us a high-level overview of fentanyl, as well as some of her work with Narcan training. So thank you for making the time to come here tonight, Anjanette.
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having me. We're going to talk about the fentanyl crisis in Santa Clara County, and we are also going to do a quick overview about Narcan, of which you will get more of a sort of an in-depth thing on the 31st, as I understand that you have an event coming up that day as well. As Terry said, I work for Santa Clara County's Department of Alcohol and Drug Services, or now known as Substance Use Treatment Services. I've been a nurse manager there for 28 years, all of my career in the county in addiction medicine. And I'm also the founding member of the Santa Clara County Opioid Overdose Prevention Project, which together allows us to put Narcan out into the community, do presentations like this, and really get to the beginning of where all of this kind of goes to. So when we talk about fentanyl, it's always a good place to start with the history. Where does opioids come from? What's it about? It's been around since the 1800s in some form or another. Synthetic opioids were developed in the early 20th century. They were initially started as anxiety medications, which we quickly realized did not really treat anxiety. It just let people go to sleep. So if you could just go to sleep and sleep your problems away, there it was. And then as the slide says, it was named after George Atchison for a chemical compound with morphine-like activities. What is an opioid? It is a combination of compounds that are released to receptors that you have in your body, that will take away pain, also referred to as an opiate. Terms are interchangeable. When we talk about this, the last 5 years or so, we have seen a horrific rise in the number of fentanyl use and fentanyl overdoses in the county. It is 50 to 100 times more potent than anything else that's out there, any other opiate. It takes there's a slide that demonstrates this, the smallest amount of fentanyl to actually cause an overdose and potential for death. It is illegal. It was developed in the late 1950s as an anesthesia. And if you're like me, fortunately, I'm allergic to it, so I can't ever have it. But people have, taken it from what its intended purpose is and started to use it in a way that's not consistent with what it was intended to do. And so in the probably the mid 2000s, we started to see illicit use of fentanyl coming into the United States, which became problematic because you can get it in places like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, Twitter, and all of those other places where our students and other people can find the medication and buy it without the benefit of a prescription. This is what some of the counterfeit medication looks like that's been seized over the last couple of years. And 2 times a year, the Drug Enforcement Agency, or the DEA, sponsors a National Take Back Day. And we worked in collaboration this year with Morgan Hill PD and Gilroy PD to host 2 locations there. Nationwide, we collected 700,000 pounds of illicit medication, which is a huge amount. And in Santa Clara County, we collected almost 70,000 pounds. So we collected medication that people no longer needed, right? So if you had a cold or something and you got promethazine, which is a cough medicine with codeine, and you didn't need it, rather than people flushing it down the toilet or dumping it in the sink, they could bring it back to us, which is an important effort on our part, because sometimes generations have young people, right? Grandparents are raising teens. They take medication that's not necessarily their own. And so if they had a mechanism to get rid of it, it was found to be less likely that it would be around. But you can see the startling resemblance to an actual medication versus what is illicit or illegal. The problem with drugs like this in this top slide, here is where it breaks into 4 quarters. And when illicit medication or counterfeit medication is created, you never really know where the fentanyl ends up. So if you break up those 4 pieces and someone is sharing it, 3 people might not get any fentanyl at all and be perfectly fine, and 1 person gets it all. And then that is, what we're seeing, with overdose deaths.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I think I'm pretty naive in a lot of this stuff. So in terms of how kids are getting it, are you saying that like all these social media sites, the Snapchat, all this stuff, so are you saying are they texting some place that will deliver it to them?
Some person,
my address,
yes.
Send it to me.
Yes.
And there's a place and there's places out there that are just they're able to access some place that's able
Yes.
to give it to them.
There's been a menu posted on Snapchat. So if you're savvy with Snapchat, I am not, probably due to my age, which is good. There's a menu there. People know how to access it and what the different emojis mean. They send out a text. It's been delivered by Uber. It's been delivered by Lyft. It's been delivered by Uber Eats.
Okay. And do you know if there's any movement or anything to get the tech companies who are basically own these social media sites?
There is. The problem with when we talked to Gilroy PD and Morgan Hill PD, who launched extensive investigations, because Gilroy in February had 5 overdose at the high school. Okay. And so when we asked for an investigation, the problem became the ISP, right? So the internet service provider could not track, because they're burner phones. Like if you watch TV, there's burner phones, there's burner accounts that don't really link to an individual. It's some random person, a ghost name, something like that. So they're having a very difficult time. So they've asked for assistance from higher level law enforcement, FBI and things like that. And so far, nothing has come of it. They did make 1 arrest for someone that was really soliciting on the street more than behind one of the social media platforms. But we'll see where that comes. Because the other thing is proving the intent to kill someone, right? And so that becomes a whole legal thing. Did the person who sold it really intend for the person to pass away? And according to the district attorney's office that we've worked with, that is not the intent, right? The intention is to hook someone and keep them buying, not to have the source go away.
Thank you for that.
So we're trying, they're trying. I think it's just a little harder, than people anticipated. This right here in this corner is about as much fentanyl as it takes to cause someone to die in relation to the size of a penny. It's about 4 grains of salt is all it takes. It's such a small, tiny bit of fentanyl. And so because, again, we don't know where it ends up in the tablet when it's a counterfeit pill, you just never know. The county has a campaign, and I think I have a slide. It's called Expect Fentanyl. So we tell people, if you get your prescription or your medication from anywhere other than a licensed pharmacy in a brown bottle with a label on it, you should expect fentanyl in it, right? If you get it from some random source, you should expect fentanyl. And then the DEA has a program called One Pill Can Kill, because you don't know, and none of us really know. So in Santa Clara County, the last year's statistics were made available was 2020. We had 142 people die of an opiate overdose, and of that, 86 were related to fentanyl. Okay, this year alone, I know of about 11 just in the first couple of months of the year. We had a Stanford student, we had somebody in Gilroy, we just had 3 overdoses in Gilroy last weekend. 2 were overturned by the use of Narcan, 1 we were not successful. We've had 2 students lose their lives in Santa Clara County. So it's there, and we're working as diligently as we can. So as of November 2021, 101 people, these statistics came from the coroner's office, the county coroner, Dr. Jordan. 34 were under the age of 25. Fentanyl increases or overdoses have increased almost over 200% now, right? And then 10 to 24-year-olds. So the Snapchat thing and the whole social media thing is really been a detriment. The pandemic obviously did not help, as people were isolated away from loved ones and their normal routines. The sense of isolation and desperation became very, very prominent. The Santa Clara County Opioid Overdose Prevention Project is a collaborative effort between all of the branches of Santa Clara County's health and hospital system and all of our joint community partners, our school districts, law enforcement, district attorney's offices, public health department. We have spent the last 7.5 years providing presentations like this to anyone who wants one. It doesn't matter. We will give Narcan to anybody who wants one at the county's cost. We bear the cost of it. It's $150 a box. We've distributed successfully about 5,000 kits just through the efforts of my department or my small clinic. What have we done? So youth campaigning, parent outreaches, PE, law enforcement, community centers. We're working on a proposal to have Narcan put outside of juvenile hall, because there's a big push of drug use in juvenile hall. And if Narcan was available there, we might not have that 10 to 24-year-old threshold where people are using and dying. This is the Expect Fentanyl campaign and the links that are available. There's literature that's been distributed. We can certainly make some available to you next week if you think it's helpful. We'll make sure somebody brings it. For Narcan or naloxone, Narcan is the brand name, naloxone is the generic name. It's 4 milligram doses, 2 in a box. It technically works by taking the medication that's in your receptors, and you have 3, mu, delta, and kappa. It's in the mu receptor. So any pain medicine you take sits in that receptor. And when there's too much, your 3 of the most important body systems are your heart, your brain, and your lungs. And they work dependently on one another, and we want them to. And when there's too much of an opiate on board, they start working independently of one another. So the brain does something, the heart does something else, the lungs expand or they don't. And the use of naloxone brings all of those 3 systems back together so that the person can be resuscitated and breathe. And this slide just demonstrates how the naloxone, represented by the little blue raspberry, takes the medication out of the receptor. And because naloxone has a stronger affinity to that, it is easily removed from that. When we were doing presentations for our law enforcement partners, we quickly realized that while they do a fabulous job of keeping us safe on the streets, they often didn't know all of the medications that might be affected or that might affect us. So we put this slide together, and it is by no means inclusive of every medication, but it just demonstrates that There's only two naturally occurring opiates, and that's morphine and codeine. And from there, everything else is made. So when you heat morphine, you get an ester or a residue. That's where heroin comes from, methyl disorphine. From there, semi-synthetic meds are half lab created and half naturally occurring. And those are the things we see every day. Norco, Dilaudid, Percodan, Percocet, something you might get from visiting the dentist or having a small surgical procedure. Something we use in clinic in the treatment of addiction is buprenorphine or Suboxone. The fully synthetic meds, so there's nothing natural about them. They're all lab created. Fentanyl, methadone, tapentadol. The one I always call people's attention to on that slide is loperamide. It's the chief ingredient in Imodium. So people think there's a box warning that says when not used as directed may cause euphoria. And when you're 16 or 20 or 12, you think euphoria means high. And it's cheap and it's easy and you can still buy it. And you crush it and people have snorted it and tried to inject it and they're not going to get high. They're just going to get a bowel obstruction. They're just going to be very, very ill. They're going to blow out their colon and have a whole bunch of other issues. So we do a lot of education around Imodium, okay, because I guarantee every medicine cabinet in the state, in the country, has Imodium in it, right? And then the endogenous opioids are things that are naturally occurring completely, endorphins and calphalins and things like that. And then what is it? Naloxone is an opiate antagonist or a blocker, which blocks the overdose in people and it reverses it in people. There's 4 methods of delivery. Intravenous, we leave for our EMS 911 first responders because that's direct to your bloodstream. Intramuscular, we did a focus group and we gave some to our students and some nurses and some law enforcement. And I asked them to put the syringe to the vial and draw up medication and no one could do it. Because it's a lot. Open the package, pop the top, clean the skin, draw it up, draw it back, and it's just too much. So even though it costs $1 and intranasal Narcan costs $150, it was much more cost effective for us to use intranasal because people would use it. And that was what we were hoping. And then subcutaneous is like your TB test. That's not effective at all. It's short acting. It only lives in the body about 20 to 90 minutes, although you don't have to wait that long between the deployment of 2 kits. And it does not get anyone high. It cannot hurt someone if you deploy it and they don't have any opiate on board. You cannot hurt them. So naloxone is really like the CPR for the 21st century. If you were to encounter someone on the ground, on campus, in your personal life, in your neighborhood, you would call 911, you would start CPR, you would deploy Narcan. Whether you know what's happening or not, it's okay if you don't. Okay. And then this is what a Narcan kit looks like. 4 milligrams times 2, which there's no weight requirement or restriction. So any weight over the age of 20, because it's not indicated for anybody under the age of 6 months of age. So 6 months to infinity, 20 pounds, because that's the average weight of a 6-month-old, to however much they weigh. There is no weight restriction. And then we are working to bringing another product to market, or to the county's arsenal, if you will. Cloxato is an 8 milligram times 2 product also. So that will work better for people who have long-term use, even if they're a young person, because some people have a long-term use and they're have been using a long time. And so we're hoping to bring that because that will work really, really well. Questions? Yes.
I didn't hear you mention any signs or symptoms of a person that might have overdosed. Now, if you see a bottle there or you're hanging around with friends, say, oh my God, they took 2 of those tablets that were illegal things, then you might know, but.
Sure. So signs and symptoms of an opiate overdose, largely they're going to be unconscious. And if they're not, they're going to be awake and they'll be able to track your movements, but they may not be able to speak to you because their speech center's been affected. They may have slack muscle. So if you pick up their arm or their leg and you expect them to engage the muscle and you let go, they cannot. You may hear some gurgling or rattling in the back of the throat. That's called agonal breathing. They're not really exchanging air. It's kind of just getting trapped in the throat. They're going to be what we call cyanotic, blue around the mouth. If it's tinged and you're not really sure, look at their nail beds. If the victim is female or wearing nail polish, gel, acrylic, anything like that, look at their toenails, because the toenail bed will also be blue. Those are the largest the largest signs and symptoms of an opioid overdose. But again, it looks like lots of other things. So that's why we, EMS, county EMS has kind of nicknamed Narcan the CPR for the 21st century, because we really don't know what's happening to someone on the ground. Other questions? No?
Yeah, I had a question.
Certainly.
Who should have Narcan kits?
My personal opinion is everybody. My professional opinion is still everybody, but I understand that there may be limitations. So potentially in a school setting, ideally your health office, your front office, and there should be one in each classroom.
And how about parents at home?
Yes, absolutely. And if they are not if parents are not comfortable or students are not comfortable, so oftentimes the students will come to my office and say, I have a friend who's using, can I have one? Absolutely. We don't turn anybody away if they want it. So parents can come to our office if they're not comfortable coming to the school and asking, or a student can come as well.
And no prescription is necessary, right?
No, there's a state standing order done by Dr. Karen Smith that covers the prescription. And then the county also has a state standing or standing order in the county itself to cover that. So there's no prescription because we're just going to give the kit.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I just wanted to point out, my husband has had several surgeries in the last year. And when he was sent home with opioids on purpose by prescription, and they didn't have any fentanyl in them, we were still issued an Narcan kit.
That's
because
right.
If he accidentally took it or a caregiver accidentally gave him the wrong thing or too much, we might need it.
That's right.
Even in a legal situation.
We worked with, we had a pharmacy resident studying to be a pharmacist who worked on an algorithm at Valley Medical Center to develop this algorithm that when an opioid, any kind of pain medicine prescription was given, that a pop-up showed up on the screen that says, was Narcan offered? And then a checkbox, was it taken or was it declined? So that we had a tracking mechanism, because if they came for a refill, and this is before we started reducing the number of opioid prescriptions that were leaving us, we could track how many times did they say no. And then on the third time, they couldn't say no. They had to take it with them when they left. So it's sort of a force issue, but it is covered by some insurances. Medi-Cal covers it, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna currently cover the cost. So we give it for free. So I'm like, just come get it. It's okay.
That was my question. You see with testing kits for COVID and other things, there have been large purchases federally. Is there any action being taken to lower that cost for those who aren't insured or don't have the $150 to purchase?
Sometimes if a prescription is actually given, a paper prescription, and someone has to take it to a pharmacy, there are cash discounts for that. What they are, I don't know, because every pharmacy is going to be different. There is a state grant program available, but usually agencies such as your school district or us, right, will order directly from the state grant so that we can continue to give it at no cost in conjunction with whatever we're paying for. Because right now there's a 30-day moratorium for the state because of the number of kits being ordered.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So
Does that have an expiration date?
it does. The expiration date is usually 2 years from the date that we get it. So right now, the kits we're distributing expire in 2024. There is a push from the manufacturer that says it's good for another 1 year after the expiration date. But as a medical professional, I'm going to tell you not to really listen to that, because I would hate for someone to use an expired kit and something happened untoward and that person could have been resuscitated if the medicine was not expired, right? There are additional liability protections that are put into place nationwide on a state-by-state basis, which protects people from being sued criminally or civilly for attempting to help. But I would never want someone, to be sued because it could have been prevented by using medication that's not expired. So if I give a kit, then I tell the person I've given it to, you're going to call me the week the first week of the month it expires so that I have 2 weeks to get you a new kit. You'll bring me that one back and we'll swap it out. There's lots of mechanisms we put into place to ensure that only actual active medication is out there. Yes.
So, yeah, so thank you. This was an extremely informative presentation. Appreciate it very much. So I think we definitely need to get the tech companies involved. Sounds like they are, but maybe we just need to see how how things are progressing and what's going on. If you have any information of how we can help with that, especially if we need to get in contact with other political leaders, state senators, representatives, stuff like that, to kind of do that, I definitely would like to hear from you.
Absolutely. I will
Definitely get
absolutely do
involved,
that.
See what we can do.
Sure.
With these companies to see what can be done.
Somebody has to be held responsible somewhere along the way.
Yeah. And
Besides the individual.
Or just be part of a solution.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
can help, because sometime we have to figure it out. So, yeah. Appreciate it very much. I also want to thank Dr. Meyer and Terry as well for putting this together. I know I asked for this I think a couple of board meetings ago, and I appreciate, this was exactly what I was looking for. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. If you have anything else, Terry knows how to find me.
Yes, it's been an unfortunately common topic among all the school boards in the county, and I presume many more places than that. Sobering too. Okay, let's move on to communications. At this time, we would have any DTA or CSEA rep that was present. We don't have anyone that wants to speak to that, so we will skip that. Next, we would have public comment on items not on the agenda. If there are people that would like to speak to an item that's not on the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move on from that. Next, we have the consolidated motion, and it's a big list this time. We have 26 items. Is there a motion, or does anyone want to pull items from the agenda?
I'll move that we approve items 17.1 through 17.26 on the consent agenda.
Okay, there's been a motion by Fiona, second by Debbie, to approve the consent agenda. Is there any comment or discussion before we take the vote on that? Hearing none. Riley?
I approve.
Ava?
I approve.
Board, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that is a 5-0 vote. So many pages, it takes me a minute to get to the next item. That would have been the ones that we pulled, which we didn't. So now we are to business action. Course of study, ethnic studies pilot first year implementation. So the staff will now be presenting this. Dr. Meyer and your team.
Yes, thank you. As we've been discussing throughout this year, we have our ethnic studies task force team, and they are going to present the draft ethnic studies framework and seek board approval for the ethnic studies pilot first year implementation for the 2022-2023 school year. I'll take this moment to thank all of those who are coming before us for all of their hard work, and certainly hand it over to Terry, who I believe will be doing the introduction.
Yes, thank you. And we are thrilled to be back for ethnic studies update. And I would like to, in addition to what Dr. Myers just said, give a special thanks to our chair of the Ethnic Studies Task Force, Dr. Julie Nick, and our department coordinators of the Social Studies Department, Derek Miyahara and Nate Bowen. Them, as well as the other 7 or 8 folks that are part of the Ethnic Studies Task Force, has put in many, many days, many hours and thoughtful conversations around the framework that they are presenting to you tonight. In fact, tonight we're going to do an update on some of the feedback that was given in the prior meeting on units 1 through 4. A discussion on the final 3 units that they're bringing forward that hasn't been presented in that prior meeting. So those are units 5, 6, and 7. Then they'll give some updates on some next steps, including lesson planning updates, and we'll end with a Q&A session, if there needs to be. And today, our recommendation is for the board to approve the ethnic studies course for the pilot implementation of the 22-23 school year. This will allow the ethnic studies teachers who are teaching the small scale implementation of classes, the time and opportunity to implement the framework. And that'll also allow all of us the opportunity to make observations, get feedback, and continue to check in and evaluate the feedback and bring this back to the board in the spring of 2023 for the final AB 101 approval process. And so with that said, I would like to turn it over to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Hello, may I interrupt you 1 minute?
Sure.
There will be public comments on this after your presentation, just so you all know.
Great. Okay, thank you. Good evening. It's so wonderful to see you again, Board of Trustees and student members and Dr. Meyer, and of course to see a lot of members of our community and administrators. As Terry mentioned, we've been working really hard and are so excited to present this ethnic studies curriculum framework to you that we know you have seen in some depth already. This is spelled out in the framework, but we always like to start by pointing out our North Star and the values that really guide the development of this class and our teaching, which is self-knowledge and reflection, empathy, community, solidarity, inquiry, and transformation. So we see this as this really wonderful opportunity in the foundational 9th grade year to build this community of learners that will be learning and growing together. So some updates since the last time that we presented is that we have continued to gather really meaningful, helpful feedback from community members through various focus groups with students, staff, and community members. We held one, for example, with parents and family members of African-American and Black students and staff, and Kiyoshi Taylor, who is in attendance, helped with that meeting as well, and we really appreciate that support. So we've had a number of different events to really hear feedback, which has given us some great ideas for teaching and has also really affirmed that we're on the right track with this work. So that's been wonderful. We also want to thank you for your meaningful feedback at the last board meeting. And since then, some of the points that have been raised, your feedback was extremely helpful, and we'll go in just a moment to look, very specifically at the ways that some of that has been incorporated. And then additionally, I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Al Camarillo from Stanford, who, as you know, is one of the founders of the field of Mexican American Studies. And it was really exciting that he got to go over our framework in detail and really appreciated the opportunity. He said it looked fantastic, and he had some, minor suggestions that we incorporated into a few of the essential questions and learning objectives. But it was a really great affirmation from somebody who's so well established in the field. So looking more specifically at the way that we incorporated some of your feedback are the points up here highlighted in yellow. I won't go through all of those learning objectives since they're spelled out in the framework, but specifically in that second bullet point, we just wanted to be very explicit that students will be learning about the various social, political, economic contributions and experiences of people in communities of color. So specifically Asian Americans, Black and African Americans, Latina, Latino, Latinx communities, and Native Americans. And then as you can see also in that fourth bullet point, the really helpful suggestion from Mr. Dave, that students will learn about the economic, political, technological, scholastic, and civic contributions in addition to artistic and cultural. So I think especially living here in the Bay Area, right? And having the good fortune that we do and with our STEM programs and Google and high tech, we think that's going to be extremely valuable as another way to ensure that our curriculum is very robust. So with that, we're going to go ahead and highlight some of the learning objectives and specifics from the next 3 units. So I will turn it over to Mr. Bowen for Unit 5.
Dr. Yip. All right, thank you once again for having us here. I just want to say once again that it's been a privilege to be a part of this process. I also want to acknowledge the folks from the community who are here to stand up for this class. I want to just recognize them because really they were the germ of this thing. It came from their push, it came from their advocacy. So, you know, we've really worked hard to see that through and honor their voice. Okay, so as we talked to you guys last time, our curriculum has a scope and sequence. It kind of tells a story. And as we get into Unit 5, we're getting into education and housing, which we really see as kind of like the bones of community, really the foundational pieces of community. And so some of the sample essential questions for this unit will be, what role does education play in shaping identity, culture, and community? How have historical and contemporary housing policies shaped access to opportunities within diverse communities? Some of the learning objectives include students will investigate the historical and continuing fight for education as a civil right and the impact education can have on promoting equality or disparity in the diverse population of the United States. Another one would be students will analyze the different forms education has taken in the United States past and present, linguistically, geographically, culturally, institutionally, as well as the impact these forms of education have had on diverse communities through time. So a sample assignment or class activity would be an exploration of the 1947 case of Mendez versus Westminster, which was a school desegregation case that preceded the very famous Brown versus Board of Education case and has some important connections to that case. Students will work on legal analysis. They'll read firsthand testimonials and primary sources, and then they will present through a mock trial. So this is a really cool assignment that really shows the intersection of different groups, both in the Latino community and the African-American community, as they fought for desegregation of schools.
If I could just back up one before that. So could you talk a little bit about how you created these 7 units and why these 7 units?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. So one of the things that we really wanted to do was think about how are you going to unfold this material for a 9th grade student so it's accessible, so that it's something that they can really sink their teeth into and understand. And part of that is first building community, building comfort, building kind of the building blocks of the terms, the concepts, so that they can have robust academic discussions, and then get into more specific current events based units. So if you back up a second, we start out with what is ethnic studies in the first place? What is this course all about? And then you get into, what goes into identity? What builds a person's identity? And again, that's about building community, building awareness about their fellow classmates, getting used to some of the language around ethnic studies. You get into historical roots of systems of power. That's that really heavy unit where you're looking at, where are some of the historical issues that have led to oppression, have led to discrimination that people have faced. And that will round out probably the first semester. And then the second semester is devoted to more current topics where you can explore immigration and migration, education and housing. And then you'll see what coming up next, we got some other ones that are more about current events in contemporary American society. And so I think that leads me to my colleague. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I guess I just want to understand also why these units, right? So is there some idea behind it that this will encompass everything that was part of what the ethnic studies curriculum is about? Is that how it's, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, I could speak to that. So part of the process that we use in the curriculum task force was to really examine best practices out in the field. So part of this was really thoughtfully going through the curriculum that's already been implemented in a number of school districts for many years, right? Including, San Francisco Unified, San Jose, San Mateo, San Diego, and other districts. So it was the process of really figuring out what's working well for students in these other districts, where's the data behind that, and talking with the teachers, what's been engaging for your students. So that's been really just a helpful part of the process that we could use in addition to looking at the resources from that third version of the California model curriculum that was unanimously approved by the State Board of Education. So it was a combination of looking at all those different resources, and then, as Nate said, as a group of teachers to kind of craft the narrative arc of the course.
So is the idea, though, when I look at it, so none of them are necessarily specific towards one ethnic group, right? So is the idea that all ethnic groups, or at least the four foundational ethnic groups, as spelled out by the curriculum, right? Is that they're going to be each of those groups will be represented in each of these units?
That's a great question. So we are fully committed to teaching a complex and robust history about each of the groups that we've been discussing. And so the intention is to teach about each of those groups throughout each semester. Each particular unit can be shorter or longer. So for example, in that What is Ethnic Studies unit, the very first one, right, that's more of like a 2-week case study, which definitely centers the experiences of those different student groups of color at San Francisco State University and throughout the Bay Area. But there could be particular units that are more heavily emphasizing certain groups. For example, in that unit 3 on historical origins of systems of power, because we're analyzing the impacts of colonization and slavery, as well as forms of resistance. Certainly there, we're going to really emphasize experiences of African Americans and Indigenous Americans. But it's over the course of the semester that we'll be integrating those various groups. And when we checked in with Dr. Camarillo about that approach, he said he thought that was very appropriate for a K-12 high school environment. And I think that's why in some high schools, you can see those different approaches, like either the whole unit on Latinos and the next unit on Asian Americans, for example, or this more kind of conceptual thematic approach where we're still teaching that history at a lot of depth, but weaving it through a little bit more, which we think can also be really engaging because we do have such a highly diverse student population. Please.
Yeah, I just want to add that real quick. So one of the early discussions when we had the task force was, is this going to be set up with a group by group unit, like an African American unit, Native American unit, or are we going to do the thematic approach? And the group early on came to a pretty quick consensus that we wanted to do thematic because we felt that opened the door to provide more voices and more stories that might not necessarily be part of those 4 core groups. We didn't want to we wanted to be able to include as many people as possible with that scope and sequence.
Okay. So I'm moving on. I'm going to talk about Unit 6, which is the justice system. It's another social structure that has a great impact on communities of color. We're going to talk about different things. And one thing I want to kind of emphasize is that the questions that we're talking about, we're showing on the slide, the questions and the subjects we're going and the essential questions. These are the only ones that are there. These are just a subset of them. So there's more in the framework. We're just kind of highlighting some of them. So essential questions for this justice system unit. What are the origins and purposes of the justice system in the United States? How have diverse communities been impacted by and engaged with the justice system throughout history and today? And so some of the learning objectives that we're looking at, and certainly not all of them, would be that students will investigate the legal foundation of the system, including laws and law enforcement, courts, incarceration in the United States, justice system, including Western legal traditions, colonialism, and the system of slavery. So here we're going to start to discuss the ways that the justice system impacts different groups of people in different ways, enforcement strategies, different laws. We can look at laws and they can be enforced in different ways in different communities and therefore have differential impacts. We're going to look at a lot of these. We look at bail, some bail laws and bail systems. All of these things have differential impact on different communities. Okay, so students will investigate the unique traditions of law and order from communities of color that also influence life in the United States today. So continue to look at different legal systems and their impact on different communities. Okay. Now, so some example assignments and class activities, exploration of the court system. So we're creating roadmaps. We're going to teach our students how to navigate through the legal system. And that's going to be an important thing for them to understand. And just a generally good thing for students to know how to do. Sample, we may do some sample case studies. I'm very excited about this one, United States versus Evans. This was the Vincent Chin case. This was actually of personal import to me because Vincent Chin was actually killed in September of 1982, my freshman year in college. And so I came on to college the month that he was killed, and this court case actually galvanized a whole set of Asian American activists, of which I was one. And before I got to college, I had no idea of anything that was going on in the Asian American community. I had very little concept of myself as an Asian American. And this case came out, and through the process of following this case and learning about what had happened to Vincent Chin back in 1982, came out with a sense of my identity as an Asian American person in the United States. So I was excited to see that. So, and then we'll talk about.
Is the sample case study that's going to show how the law changed because of that case?
It'll show, yeah. I mean, there were certain issues that came out of the case, and it showed. We're going to look at the impacts. How I think how the case was used to galvanize a community into to understanding how legal representation and legal issues were important, and how their identity as people were shaped by those definitions of them by a legal system. And so, yeah, and some of it did change. I mean, some of it did change. There was a lot of activism that went on. And I think people became aware of a lot of things that they were not aware of, people like me. And so a whole group of people, younger people, actually started to look for change, and there was some change. So in that sense, yes.
This is a big unit.
Yeah, this is a
year-long course.
Yeah, this is
a year-long course in itself.
Well, yes, but we'll try to get it in there. And so current connections and analysis. So legal systems.
Thank you so much, Mr. Miyahara. Yes, and I want to just follow up on that point that each one of these units could really be an entire semester or year-long course of study. And I think that's something we also experience in teaching, world studies or US history or civics econ, is that we're establishing, that foundation of knowledge and building their, critical academic skills, and then hopefully sparking that interest so that as they go on, they'll be able to learn about these issues, in greater depth and complexity over time. So we have to be really thoughtful about, how much to include in any one particular unit. So following up on that, going to Unit 7, this is where students are going to be learning about various social movements and ways that people and communities have organized. So it's guided by, for example, this question: how have political and social movements advanced rights and opportunities for communities of color and other diverse groups of the US, and influenced our country and local communities historically as well as today? So along with that, students will learn about the various types of strategies and how and why different communities choose different strategies as they're working to create change in their community. So things ranging from boycotts to civil disobedience, the creation of community organizations, grassroots organizing. So really for them to examine how have different movements used this historically, right, to evaluate the impact, the success, right, some of the advantages or disadvantages, for example, of these different types of strategies throughout historical social movements. And while there are a multitude of movements we could discuss, one example is a historical inquiry on local history right here in the Bay Area and Alcatraz Island more specifically. And I actually asked students about this in my courses, like, have you ever been to Alcatraz? And a lot of them say yes. And then you start to ask them, like, what have you learned about it? And then you ask, okay, has anyone ever heard about the occupation of Alcatraz? And almost nobody, right? So this inquiry is about why did American Indians occupy Alcatraz Island in the late 1960s? And how did this event influence other Native American communities, as well as, communities more broadly? So that could be an inquiry where, students are analyzing different types of primary source documents. They're analyzing, perspective and bias. working on those critical skills of, contextualization and analysis. And then to showcase what they've learned, they might create like a photo gallery exhibit to show, digitally with like media images as well as, text or presentation. They could build a website. They could create a podcast, right? So having different ways and modalities to demonstrate what they've learned. And this is just one example, right? Some other salient movements would certainly be like the farm worker movement in California with, partnerships and coalitions between Mexican American and Filipino communities or others, but again, just a snapshot for you. And with that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Miyahara again to talk about some lessons.
So we've started planning. We're a little further along in the first 4 units because we've had them longer. So as the task force continue to work on finalizing the last 3 units, teams of teachers at both Los Altos and Mountain View began to start lesson planning on the first 4 that we had talked about earlier. So these are some of the lessons ideas that the folks at Los Altos Mountain View have come up with. Lessons on the development of ethnic studies, that would be unit 1. Visibility and invisibility, the identity iceberg. So looking at how identity is formed, how people come to understand identity. The iceberg is the idea that there's parts that you see and parts that you don't see, and both of these parts are part of your identity. So teaching students about the visible and invisible parts of themselves and who they are. Names and identity. Then we start looking into immigration and why people immigrate. Hopefully we're going to work some geography into that because we want to get some geography skills into the immigration unit. And then lessons on Southeast Asian history that come out of the model curriculum, and also Jewish identity. This also come out of the model curriculum. So these are some of the ideas we have. We're looking forward to getting started working on the last 3 units. These last 3 units and getting a handle on some of the lessons that we could be presenting to students next year on those units as well.
I was just going to add one additional follow-up, which is that, as Mr. Miyahara is mentioning, we have lots of teams of teachers. People are very enthusiastically generating curriculum, and we have, district shared folders set up unit by unit. So we're really trying to leverage the knowledge and experience that people bring to the table. So again, this is a small snapshot of many more lessons that we have been developing. Yes.
Thank you. And to wrap it up, our next steps. So again, tonight we ask for board approval of the ethnic studies course small scale implementation for piloting it for the 22-23 school year. In addition, our next steps include training and professional development for our teachers. Next year, we have 4 classes at Los Altos and 2 classes at Mountain View that are tentatively planned to hold ethnic study courses for this pilot program. And then into the 22-23 school year, we'll bring back feedback, evaluations, progress, curriculum, instructional material, examples that are being used, and ask for a formal AB 101 process, board approval for the ethnic studies program, full implementation at Mountain View Los Altos High School. And at this time, I will turn it over to any questions.
Well, I would just like to ask a few questions and make a few comments. First of all, thank you all. I recognize this is a tremendous amount of work on top of what you're already doing teaching. And I think it's very, very ambitious. As was indicated, any one of these units could be a full course. And I was especially impressed and a little worried about that fact, because these are 9th graders and you have them analyzing legal cases, which are usually reserved for people who've passed the LSAT. So I wonder how you're going to consider the level of the students and accommodate that with some very difficult topics that require advanced vocabulary and specialized knowledge. Could you just comment on that?
Sure. Thank you for the comment and question. When we incorporate something like a legal case, we would definitely be using much shorter excerpts of those cases. They're also kind of like adapted and scaffolded for ninth graders. So for example, there would be like vocabulary terms that are predefined. We would build some initial understanding of like, okay, what is a court case? What are some of the key elements? And then really pulling out what's most essential. So students might be looking at, two different opinions on a case, right? Like a majority and dissenting opinion, but pulling out like, 2 paragraphs, for example, of each one, and then teaching them to kind of unpack the arguments that are there. And I think that's one of the other reasons that it's been so helpful to work with a lot of ninth grade teachers on the curriculum task force, as well as teachers who teach the whole 4-year sequence, so that we can really be thoughtful about the academic level that our ninth graders are coming in at and how to appropriately support them through those tasks.
Thank you. I mean, it will be a real challenge. It's always a challenge to take complicated subjects and make them understandable to groups that aren't quite at the level that is usually addressed for those things. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. I absolutely love the idea of doing a mock trial as part of this. And I'm hoping you will bring our mock trial teams into the classroom so the kids can see what's available to them going forward in the years here in Mountain View, Los Altos. And I see you nodding your head. So I think that's on the plate. Great. So I did think there was one thing missing here that I really think needs to be included. One group that really needs to be included. And that is our Jewish students and our Jewish population. As you probably know, in the last couple of years, and in fact, in just the last few months, there have been some really severe anti-Jewish pamphlets circulated in Palo Alto, Los Altos, and Mountain View, and elsewhere in the Bay Area. And if you look nationwide over the last 5 years, you can see that there's been a steady increase in hate attacks on the Jewish population. In fact, a survey by the American Jewish Congress in 2020 indicated that 37% of Jewish people have been the targets of hatred attacks. So that is quite substantial. And since we have a significant Jewish community, I am hoping that we can, in the first page of the Ethnic Studies Curriculum Framework and the top of the second page, include the Jewish people among those groups, even though they are not generally considered people of color, although there are Sephardic Jews who are indeed people of color. So they, at least that subset does fit in. I would propose revising a couple of bullets, several bullets in that section, and not revising them in the sense of deleting anything, but rather in the sense of expanding slightly what we have there. And let me read to you what I propose. So for the second bullet, I would have that one read, students will explore and analyze the contribution and experiences within U.S. society of ethnically marginalized people, especially people of color, parenthetically, Asian Americans, Black and African Americans, Latino X Americans, and Native Americans, close parentheses, and Jewish people. And then for the fourth bullet, a similar change, students will learn about the economic, political, technological, scholastic, civic, cultural, and artistic contributions of ethnically marginalized people and communities, especially people and communities of color, and Jewish people and communities. And finally, on the next page, the first bullet, students will learn how, through civic engagement, systems have been challenged and actions of change for a better world have been pursued by people in solidarity. So those are the changes. And that last change was because that particular bullet was different from the others in that it was not learning about something, but had perhaps an invitation of an inference that now you have to go out and do what we are teaching you about how it was done. So to keep it more neutral, I propose the language that you just heard. And then within the body itself, on page 3, let me get down to that. And I believe it's the last paragraph underneath learning objectives for Unit 1. Students will describe and analyze the ways in which people of color, Jewish people, and allies continue to fight for representation in education and ethnic studies today, and explore why this is important. So what I've done in 3 of those items is basically expand them to include Jewish people. And in the other item, it was to rephrase it so that it is not misconceived as a requirement to take some action. So I'm hoping we can include that, and I will include that in my motion to approve what we have here.
Sure. Thank you so much for those thoughtful comments. I can tell that you, as well as the other board members, have really spent so much time examining the work that we have developed, and I appreciate that feedback. The task force, as well as the other social studies teachers in both departments and staff, and working with professors like Dr. Camarillo, have really worked to develop language and these learning objectives in the course that we think is really captures like the integrity of the field of ethnic studies. And so we have had numerous, full day release time, discussions and meetings to really carefully craft the language in the framework. I appreciate in particular your suggestion on that 3rd point in the learning objectives on students learning about civic engagement. I think that proposed language could be helpful. In terms of those other suggestions, they're pretty substantial suggestions that I think would merit some dialogue, because they do raise some complex issues. And so I think that at this moment in time, it would be, from a process perspective, it would be challenging to fully take in those suggestions, because this has been such a lengthy process. I don't know if Terry, you wanted to speak any more to that, or if kind of captured. Sure. Yeah.
So again, Bill, thank you for the sincere ideas and ways of strengthening and becoming more inclusive and supportive in what this course represents. As Julie noted, the many hours that went into this framework was really taking a look at the language that was a part of every bullet point. Many hours were spent dissecting it and ensuring, is this what we want it to say, with sincerity and earnestness. And so I would like to ask that they continue this process of being thoughtful in their decision-making and their deliberation of making the decisions, and we'll definitely take this back and get to you ASAP. But one thing about this team that I very much appreciated was the thoughtful decisions, not the haphazard decision-making with strong ideas, but taking a moment to process and look into, and then deciding that, yes, this is definitely the language that we feel is most supportive. And so I would like to ask that we take this back into consideration and get back to you within the week or so. If I could just kind of throw out a random quantitative time to pull this group together and to deliberate. But I think the team is asking to not have to choose right now to accept this proposal because of the thoughtful process that they've embarked on this entire journey.
So, but I don't understand. I mean, this is the first time anybody thought of including Jewish groups in this?
So they do have our Jewish ethnicities in two of the pieces of the framework. Based off of some feedback prior, they had one, and then they added it into a different place where they thought that it sincerely fit. And so now this is the first time that they're hearing to add the Jewish ethnicity into multiple places of the framework. And again, they're not saying no, they're saying, we're hearing this, please let us come back and take a look at what you're proposing within the framework and give a thoughtful response back.
Well, in that case, I would like to postpone a vote on approval tonight until we have a response, perhaps at the next board meeting or the subsequent board meeting in June.
It might go to Nate, because I think you're on this slide. But you guys provided some examples of what would be in the lessons plan. And one of those examples was the lessons on Jewish identity via the third and final approved, only that version of the state's model curriculum.
Correct.
So my reading of that, when I read through this ahead of time, and when I read through all the paperwork, or all of your, excuse me, not paperwork, the descriptions and all the really hard work that all of you have done, was that those two would be woven throughout the course and would naturally be part of the conversations. And so that was my read of it. Is that a correct interpretation?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess, Phil, where I'm going is we haven't heard from any other board members. I don't know if any of us want to delay this vote or this conversation. But I did want to get a reassurance that yes, this was being incorporated, and you specifically bulleted it out to that end.
So, I mean, Phil, you know, as you know, this is a very complex subject. You know, you're right to bring out about the issues about the anti-Semitic sentiments that have been going on for centuries, probably, right? So for a long time. But this ethnic studies curriculum, right? Because there's, you know, just as there's also an anti-Muslim sentiment out there as well, right? And they're not specifically called out in this curriculum either. The curriculum was basically created to really just focus on these four foundational groups. And that's why they explicitly named them out in the curriculum, right? In the I forget exactly the acronym, ESMC. ESMC, right? And they specifically spelled it out. So I think the way that I understand that they want to address all the different groups, because it just, you know, you just can't put them all in one, basically in one bucket. You just can't, right? They allow each curriculum to basically add, you know, different, how should I put it? They can add like a subject within their ethnic studies program to address some of the other groups. So basically, if it is a Jewish group and they want to address that in the curriculum, they can address it. And I think that's where Fiona's point was saying they can do it, but also like an anti-Muslim, you know, to address what's going on there as well, to find out how that can be addressed in this as well. But the overall foundational groups are still those four foundational groups that they have explicitly stated in the curriculum, and that's what needs to be covered. So I get what you're saying, Phil. It just I know that it's just, you know, because because I know what's going to happen. If you have the Jewish group, then the Muslims will come and say, hey, what about us? You know, put us explicitly, name us in there too, right? And why not, right? I mean, what's the argument to not, right? So, and I'm sure there's others, out there as well that you can go on. So I think that's where you have to look at. Well, we're just going to go and follow what the actual curriculum requires, and go with that. I think that's what from what I understand, most other school districts are doing, especially I know Los Angeles, when they took it on, they basically just took the words exactly what was written in the ESMC, and that's exactly what they're focused on, is those four groups only.
I have a comment. What I really like about what you've done and why I believe it is so important is because we're working to teach ninth graders foundationally to see themselves in what you teach and to see others. And that sounds very simple, but it's very important. And so to that end, looking at this curriculum with the 4 areas as described is very important because we see that not everyone sees everyone, especially with these underrepresented groups. That being said, I really appreciate how you went to the thematic, looked through the thematic lens to Dr. Falace's point, to Phil's point. In order to see themselves, we do want to look at the demographics of MVLA. And certainly we have populations mentioned, our Jewish population, our Muslim students and others who need to see themselves. And I see that you're going to weave that throughout, particularly those, and I believe this was your language, Phil, who are ethnically marginalized people. And when you look at both groups that are not explicitly in the 4, perhaps underrepresented, they're certainly ethnically marginalized and oppressed. And so that way of weaving that in, I believe, will be the way that you can pull out the important stories of the peoples mentioned and let students see themselves and see others. So to that point, I would recommend to the board to move forward with this because it really will have that woven in. But I would also recommend to the task force to take back the language that was seen. And while we may not want to start pulling out different groups explicitly within the theme, we can look for instances within history, and it's all over the place, for many of these groups that have been oppressed and discriminated against, so students can continue to see themselves. So that would be my recommendation to the board, and I do believe that the language that we saw is important to consider when you look, and then I will end, but I feel very strongly about who people are targeting and who has been targeted in the last 50 years. We have to address that. We have to address that hate. And so I think there's a case to be made for making sure and certain that we explicitly write that language into the framework, maybe more so than we currently have, to make sure that once we're not teaching it anymore, that the next person who comes will be teaching that.
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
Just from a student perspective, this is like so cool. I'm so excited for this to be implemented. My sister will probably be able to experience this when she gets to high school. But I was just wondering, will there be any inclusion of, maybe choose more broader term, like Middle Eastern Americans? Because I feel like, especially at MVLA, that's a significant ethnic minority as well.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And thank you all for capturing, so many thoughts very eloquently. I think in particular, that second unit on identity and narratives is a space for students to really explore so many different dimensions of their heritage, whether that's their ethnic heritage, country of origin, the languages that they speak, their religious background. I think that's a space where definitely students of, whether it's Middle Eastern background, students who may be Jewish from, many different areas or born here in California as well, can be, reading narratives written by authors, from that particular group, as well as, exploring their own identities through different types of writing and self-reflections and ethnography. So yeah, there would definitely be space for that.
I just think eventually, though, you're going to have to be careful because there's too many groups. Okay, and you're not going to please everybody. You're just not. Okay, I mean, we had this conversation just with the Asians alone, right? I mean, in that group alone, it's just, right? I mean, it's just too many. I mean, you cannot complete everybody. So you're gonna have to take a stance. And, you know, and that's why I think you can look at LA County, or let's say, sorry, LA Unified, and figure out where you're gonna focus, you know, of course, you're gonna have, because there's a lot of groups out there.
Yes.
And a lot of identities. So I think eventually you have to think about how you want to do it. I mean, part of it is you want to have some representation of what we see here in our community, but also the other part of this course to me is also to teach people here in the community people that aren't necessarily here to have that awareness as well, because eventually they're going to go out into the world and they will meet people of different identities. So part of that, you know, is what's important about this course as well. So you just have to, you know, make those tough decisions.
Debbie, did you have anything?
What I wanted to say is, I think that this is a huge task. We all know it is. We've spent many hours that we've heard, and to try to consolidate everything down into a one-year curriculum that covers everything is just, I don't think is attainable for all the different aspects of, you know, society. And that I think that as a pilot, and you've heard what Dr. Felisa said, and that as you go forward, if you can find room in the curriculum to add more areas of what our society is in Mountain View, Los Altos School District, to embed it in there, and it maybe it changes throughout the year. I think that would be important, but I also think that it would be sad to delay what you've already done and the work you put in it to not move forward right now. And I do hear you, Phil, and I don't want to exclude any area, but like Sanju was saying, it'd be hard to include everything. And we may, as a result of this meeting, be getting more input on other areas that we have excluded or that aren't. But you do reference out in here different things on the ability to, you know, lessons on Jewish identity, modern curriculum. So it's not that it's being excluded, it's just not spelled out. And if we do hear areas that maybe we, throughout the year that have been excluded, then we can feed it back to you and you can include it later. So we thank you for the work.
Right?
Yeah,
That's why the pilot,
This
right?
is why it's a
That's our
pilot.
learning.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll add my comments then. Does anybody else have anything yet to say? And then we'll have public comment too. One is I love the theme part, you know, compared to group part. And then I think that Phil's concern would be more whatever, obvious or whatever, if you did it by group, because you're going, well, you left out that group. But if it's by theme, then each theme can include the main groups, but not be limited to those. And I like that thought or phraseology or flexibility, include but not limited to. So that when you're discussing a certain kind of topic, if a different group, for instance, Jewish or religion, Islamic or whatever, that fits into that one, then you can branch off to that. And if you have students that are in those group, you can branch off into that. And then that will be a good flexible learning situation for everyone. So I like that part. So, and I agree though that I would like to see, I'm the president, so I can call for the motion. I can't make the motion, but I would like to move forward with the pilot personally. And that's a nice thing about a pilot. And that's a nice thing about first year, and that we're going to have feedback and evaluation on how it goes, and to see if we've included some topics sufficiently or not, or overemphasize topics that turn out to not be as important to us after the fact. So yeah, I would like to proceed. And I agree, it's been a humongous task. It's reasonably controversial, reasonably thought-provoking all the way around. So thank you for all the work. And the other point is you got to start somewhere.
Just to be clear, Captain, you don't want to change it.
I think we should.
Having a vote as written.
Yeah, I would be happy with that.
Because you were saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, the nice thing about a pilot is
No,
after the pilot.
But I just think you were saying they're changing the
So I'd like to, in that case, in the spirit of, let's see what happens when we run the pilot and take a look at it after we've had some experience with it. Let's see how well those other ethnically marginalized groups are represented and discussed. I would like to make the following motion. I move that the document titled Ethnic Studies and MVLA Curriculum Framework, as discussed, be approved as the framework solely for the elective course Ethnic Studies to be conducted as a pilot in the 2022-2023 school year, and that a study session of the board be held in the second half of November 2022 to examine the materials used and lessons taught to the date, the framework, that the framework as of the date of the study session for the purpose of beginning consideration of possible revisions.
Do we have a second?
Well, hold on. So I guess I'd like to hear the comments.
There's, yeah, we haven't had any community comment
Yeah.
yet.
I know, but we could have the motion and then the comments. Phil, do you want to make your motion now, or should we have public comment first?
Doesn't matter to me.
You already did make your motion, actually.
I did.
Does anybody second that motion or have an amendment to that motion?
I guess before, I'd like to hear comments.
I think, Phil, that people don't want to second it, at least until we've had public comment.
Okay.
Right. So,
No, it's not public comment. I just want to hear what you thought about what Phil's suggesting. I guess I want to hear either from Dr. Meyer, Terry, and of course, probably you, because you probably thought about it. So is there any, I guess, let me understand what you're saying. Let me see if I paraphrase it, Phil, and tell me if I got it right. So what you're saying is that you're basically accepting the way it's written today. We'll vote on that it's a pilot, and that we will re-review this entire framework the second semester of next school year.
But he didn't say that, he said November.
Oh, sorry, November, excuse me, I missed that one. Okay, so November, I don't know if November will be, enough time will be in November. I'm not sure which November is it, right? Are you fixed on November, or can it be the second semester?
This naturally has a review in the spring, Phil. There's a detailed review as part of AB 101. It naturally has a cycle in the spring.
Yeah. Is there, yeah. So Phil, is it possible to just do it in the spring instead of November?
Well, it strikes me that in November, we will have considerable experience already. And we might be able to integrate that experience in the plans for the units yet to be done.
Does the board need to be at that level of detail? Because I'm imagining that this team in front of us will be doing that all the way along, and in fact, daily with each other to say what's working and what isn't working and where are we going and what are we doing next. And I just don't know that we need to be at that level of that granular level, Phil.
Yeah.
I think we need to have an opportunity for parents to come to a board meeting or a study session and hear what's been done and hear what's succeeding, or give their own opinions about what's succeeding. So we can have that inform our own judgments as we go forward, and we'll know what questions to ask.
So can I ask you, would you be willing to just strike the study session from your motion, but you as a board member can call for that study session in in September if you want? So we might get more information on how well it's proceeding, and know that maybe we want it in the spring. But if you want one earlier, we can call it in October.
Yeah.
Right, because we won't really have enough time to do much by November. Well, we will in a couple months. But
Well, we could do it in January at the end of the semester, after the end of the semester.
Right, but you can make that determined. It doesn't have to be woven into the motion. What I'm saying is we can make that request in the fall. Once
What if we leave the date of the study session out of the motion and just have the study session in the motion?
I guess, well, I can't make a motion, but if I could comment on it, and that would be, I'd rather separate them completely. as Debbie pointed out, because the AB 101 already has a very strict schedule on how many public sessions you have to have and how much comment you have to.
No, Catherine, that's not right. It doesn't specify how many, it specifies a minimum number.
Yeah, well, I know, but that we can have as many as we want, as long as we have at least those, yeah.
I mean, so I guess, I have no issues with saying, yeah, we'll have a study session in the future, next school year, and, we'll figure out what.
Well, would anyone like to amend this motion, or would you like to amend your motion?
Phil, so you want to go ahead and just amend the motion?
I mean, I can amend the motion just to say that, and that a study session of the board be held to examine the materials used and lessons taught to implement the framework as of the date of the study session for the purpose of beginning considerations of possible revisions. There's no date there.
I'll second that.
Okay, so if there is motion and second, we're not going to vote though until we've had public comment, because this is an agendized item. So, and maybe you guys might or might not want to answer questions to the public comment.
I think it's still valuable to hear the public comments before we vote.
Right. Yeah.
Could I ask for clarification, a repeat of the motion, the portion specifically about what would that study session would entail?
Sure. So I'll say to examine the materials used and lessons taught to implement that framework as of the date of the study session for the purpose of beginning consideration of possible revisions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Catherine, I have a question. Go ahead and take community comment, but afterwards I have a question.
After public comment, I mean, we have to have public comment on this, so I want to go ahead and do it.
No, after. I'll go after.
Right. So now we will have public comment. Do we have anyone that wants to speak on this topic? Maybe we don't have it. No one? There's pink slips, not pink, there's green. Green. Green slips in the back to fill out. I'm color challenged. I don't like pink, and now you know why. Anyway, so there is no public comment, so hearing none, we will move on. Does anybody on the board have any other comments or questions before we vote?
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'm just still puzzled why there's any need to codify that we would have a study session. We've had these fabulous teachers come talk with us twice already and update us. They're happy to come do that anytime we want to do that. Dr. Meyer is on top of this. Terry is on top of this. We know that it's a pilot year. We know that everybody's learning from each other every single day. Anyway, I'm not feeling the need to do anything other than simply approve the pilot for next year tonight. I guess I'm not feeling the need to prescribe this bill. I think our team is amazing and I think they're gonna want to do this anyway. So I just don't think we have to dictate. I don't know if we have to get in those weeds.
Would you like an amendment to it to strike that part?
Well, I would make a completely different motion. So you can vote on this motion. This motion's on the table. It may fly. It may go.
I mean, it can always be amended.
Fiona, I think there's a difference between an update at a board meeting and a study session devoted exclusively to one topic. That's why I specified a study session.
Okay, well, again, at that point in time, the board can say we'd like a single item board meeting, or we can do it when we get there. I'm just not feeling the need to connect it tonight, right now.
Well, I would like a commitment to a study session now, because I think that's important for reviewing what we're doing.
And I think and the reason why I think it, because and I do think this is a very important topic. The community is very much interested in this topic. They really want to understand because there are obviously, issues that could come through with this course. I mean, some people feel that way. I'm not saying it
But I
will.
think there's zero resistance to doing it. There's zero resistance.
No, I know there's zero resistance, but I think what's the issue with codifying it, I guess, because the fact that, okay, we're gonna have this, okay, and then we'll have it, and we don't know when it's gonna be, but we'll have it. We're codifying it, we're gonna have it. We're gonna have a study session.
Okay, I guess, okay, so here's where, oh, sorry.
Okay. On behalf of the teachers that are going to be teaching the course next year, I think that there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on them. And this is going to cause them a great deal of stress. And I think that if you ask them to come, I think they'd be happy to come and talk to you. Or we've never been unwilling to do that. But I think the more I'm concerned about my teachers. I'm concerned about the load that we put on them. I'm concerned about the expectations we put on them. And I'm concerned about I'm concerned that the more we actually codify this and the more we make of this, the more pressure that we're going to put on them. And so that's my concern as a department coordinator with 3 teachers, one of them who's going to be new to the district and undergoing the tenure process. I think it's unfair to them.
And mine was maybe a little tangential, but related to that.
Yes.
From the standpoint of, I don't view me as a board member as the person who's making specific alterations to this course. I'm not in your classroom. I'm not, I mean, I want to follow it. I want to know what's going on, of course, but the language bill around a study session to specifically begin modifications to this course. I just don't know that's our teams. I mean, we're providing feedback and we're helping in all of that, but anyway, I think that responsibility lies with all of you.
That's my concern.
Yeah. So you're feeling it's too prescriptive.
Yeah, that's okay. We're nuancing here.
Clarifying question from Melanie. What is the next steps for a course like this to become A through G? What will we see coming to the board already besides the study session?
Well, it would come back with the first reading. It would be similar. You would see the framework / curriculum, much as you've seen tonight. And it would be presented in a very similar fashion with the benefit of 1 year of having been through the process and taught the majority of the course around March, April. And then it would come back for a second reading, and that would be the approval.
And if I could just add on real fast, it is in the process of getting A to G approved right now. So our goal is for our students who are taking this class next year as a pilot to still be able to receive A to G credits for ethnic studies.
Yeah, it just won't be required for graduation yet.
That is correct.
That is the difference.
So it's the process that we would have for, many other courses, except in that AB 101, they've added in, it needs to come twice.
Are we likely to do a brown bag on it like we did this year with an update for parents perhaps? I mean,
We certainly could. I thought it was well done by the group here before you. Thank you.
Yeah,
No,
please do.
Yeah, if I could just add that, as teachers, we are totally committed to, developing this curriculum, to be continually evaluating, and assessing how our students are doing, making adjustments. And, as social studies teachers, we do really get into like the granular details of curriculum and sequencing and assessments. And, it's very specific. So we're going to be doing that on a continual basis. And it would be, I would echo Mr. Miyahara that I think it would be helpful for the teachers to have the space and time to be able to do that, and to have, cycles of inquiry where we're, looking at the data and the trends over time. But yeah, we are very open. We've done, these webinars throughout the year. We've had, numerous parent focus groups that we've shared with you all. So I think that process is going to be going on already, that we're very committed to engaging with the community and being in conversation. But it would be, very helpful to have the flexibility. I'll leave it there. Yeah.
I would also add that a large component of the assessment occurs within their team meetings, but also classroom visitation. So, it's wonderful to hear what we're going to do, but it's very different to see it. So the administrators will be visiting and conversations are happening regarding assessment, and evolve, the evolving course every week. I mean, that's really the benefit of this piloted year. So there will be multiple layers of assessment and evaluation and growth.
So I don't see how a study session negates any of that.
Bill, what would you be expecting in the study session that you wouldn't be getting from a first reading review in the spring?
Well, I would expect to see the materials used. I would expect to see some syllabi, some lesson plans, so that we can get an idea and the community can be informed of precisely what's going on. And that's what we are looking for in civic engagement, right? Transparency. Well, let's be transparent.
Do we do that for any class?
Well, we certainly.
We put out
share
the syllabus at the
syllabi
beginning of
with
the semester
parents
with
and
the
families.
family.
And online.
And
Yes.
And you list that for some materials, but you don't list every single material that you're going to ever use, do you?
Regularly, we have the central text and all of that
Yeah.
will be available, as well as supplemental materials.
Is it possible to, during the first reading, to include that as attachments? I mean, I'm just looking, I don't want to put any more stress on the teachers as well. And I think that the in-depthness of the reviews and the first readings that we've gone are beyond what we've done before for other classes. So we pretty much scrutinized this. And I understand being transparent and wanting to be out in public, but I don't know if we necessarily need to do it during a study session. If we can possibly, a board request would be, I would request from, Dr. Myers if he would like the syllabus. And, we can go other ways without having a formal study session.
I don't necessarily mind having a study session, Phil, but I just hate, as Fiona said before, have it attached to the actual motion to proceed with the pilot. And you can ask later down in the meeting during future board meetings to ask that we have a study session, and we'll see how that goes when it comes up to the appropriate time. I mean, the other choice here is that you could amend your motion, or people that aren't happy with that part being in it, I mean, we can go ahead and vote, can vote it down, and we can have a new motion that doesn't have that in it. I mean, there's a couple different choices.
I mean, the motion has been seconded and made, so, those who want to vote it down can vote it down. And you can just call the vote.
Okay, so would you prefer to leave it in your original motion? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was my motion. I'd like to have a commitment to a study session.
Okay. Well, then let's call for the vote. And like I said, if this motion does not pass, we can always have a different motion. Okay, so I will call for the vote. Riley, what would you say?
Let's start with the adults.
You want to start with the adults? Okay, no, do you want to pass on this one?
No, I'd love to hear.
I'd like to hear from you.
them first.
Yes. Do you want to say first, or do you want to?
I mean, I kind of agreeing with what you guys were saying. I feel like they worked really hard, and if they need to come back, they can come back, but I'm gonna not approve this.
And Ava?
I'll do the same.
Okay, all in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
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 That's two. All those opposed?
No.
Nay. So that one failed, 3-0 plus failed by the, 2-3. And then the student board members were also negatives.
And I just want to be on record, I'm not opposed to a study session if you need one. I just think it doesn't need to be tied to the motion to approve the pilot.
I would entertain a different motion.
That was understood.
Yeah. I would entertain a different motion if someone is so inclined.
Sure. I'll move that we approve the ethnic studies course, small scale implementation piloting for the 2022-2023 school year.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, second. There's a motion and a second. by Fiona and Sanjay on that. I don't think we need any more discussion. So we'll just have a vote. Ava,
I approve.
Riley, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Did you aye that time, Phil?
Yes, I'll vote to approve, but with the understanding that I'm going to call for a study session.
Okay.
After all this, you better.
Oh my, okay, thank you, Phil, thank you, everyone, thank you, Ethics Studies team. I think I'm gonna have to send you all, thank you. All right. We'll now move on to budget. Would that be Mike?
Yep.
All right, Mike, take it away. Budget planning. And this is info. We are not going.
Hey, Catherine, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we do one more round of applause for our board reps?
Yes. Do you accept handshakes or hugs from the board members? Oh, it's glad I would love to.
Yeah, get it on the line. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't want to let you guys go without saying goodbye. I know.
You want to give them a
So humble. You weren't sure how they just got that wrong. See you in August, right?
Yes.
I'm just gonna go back. Okay. I'm coming back.
It seems like I lost some of the board to a temporary break, so that's okay. We'll reconvene in 5. short break caused by hugging. Okay. Now, Mike, it's your turn. Please proceed.
Just do the camera. Okay. Well, Phil will come back when he's ready, back on camera. Excuse me. All right, so this item is really just to give you a preview of the high-level topics of 22-23 budget development. As you might remember from prior years, budget development is months-long process, but by the time we get to the public hearing and there's desire to change drastically anything in it, it's a tight turnaround period before we do budget actual adoption. And so we started doing this a few years ago where kind of high level, here's the big assumptions that drive the budget presenting here in May. So we'll just cruise through this. Why does technology work for everyone else? There we go. So all budgets are built upon some assumptions. So for us as a community funded district, property tax is the driver of that. And so you can see the first two bullet points that we are anticipating 8.5% growth. When I was here in March, we were looking at 9% growth. Why we reduced it down is just to be a little bit more conservative, and we can get a balanced budget with 8.5. So it's really just guarding against how those projections are going, but I'm confident we'll get 8.5. We're already at 7.25%, and that was as of May 1st. That equates to over $7.5 million. So it's always helpful to convert a percentage to a dollar value in terms of how much additional revenue is coming. And as the first bullet point mentioned, with that assumption, all the other assumptions built in, we are currently looking at a budget surplus or a positive of just under $500,000 on the unrestricted side, right? The restricted side has a lot of those COVID funds and other state grants. And so we deficit spend each year because we're starting with money in the bank, right? Kind of your bank account, so you often deficit spend. That third bullet point, notice, highlights that total revenue doesn't grow at the same 8.5% that secured property taxes do. Property taxes are that driver, but there are other sources of funds. That state aid, that's $2.9 million, and it's been that way for 10 years, stays flat. Special ed money doesn't grow by the same amount. Federal revenue doesn't grow by that same percentage. So when you take the property taxes and couple it with a lot of the revenue that stays flat, it pulls down that percentage. And so total revenue is looking to grow by only 3.3%. Again, part of that is that the current year we're wrapping up was adjusted upward due to all the COVID funds and state grants and one-time money that come in this year, not next year. So that's all lumped in when we compare year to year. We are including 6 less certificated staff. That's due to our enrollment adjustments. So we've been working closely with Ed Services on enrollment numbers and personnel in terms of adjusting staffing, right-sizing the staff for our programs and our courses, moving staff appropriately. So that is built into the budget. You can see the average cost of a teacher, and we just throw this in here. So when we're adding or reducing staff, you have a sense of that dollar amount and that salary. That's health and medical benefits and statutory benefits such as STRS, which you'll see in the next slide is 19%. Because of our 3-year salary agreement with our associations, for the first time I've ever done this, we have included a salary increase into the assumptions for next year. So we have built that in, so that's reflected in the budget. We do continue to get money from the City Mountain View through the Shoreline Education Enhancement Reserve, or EER, that JPA. We are budgeting $2.9 million for that. That's $300,000 less than what we received current year. And that's just, again, to be a little bit on the conservative side. There's a lot of volatility out in the Shoreline area with unsecured property taxes. So their mix is about half and half secured and unsecured, and unsecured, there's a lot more volatility with that. So it's putting a few safeguards in as well as trying to be as realistic as possible with that projection. Right, the minimum guarantee for that is $1.84 million, and our thought is that's just not being realistic. We budget the bare minimum each year, given what we're receiving this year. So this reflects, about a 10% drop just to safeguard that, and then of course continue with our existing programs and staffing and the wonderful services we're providing our students every day of the year. Some of the other assumptions, just so you know, we have less control over. STIRS costs are going up to 19.1%. PERS are increasing to 25.37. Both of those are a 2 percentage point increase or more. Those are not new, but those are big drivers of our employee costs. We'll get to governor's budget later, but on this of note, there was a lot of efforts for the governor's budget to throw some of the state surplus that helped paying down the unfunded liability for STIRS and PERS. We haven't seen that in his budget in January nor in the May revision. We'll see their strategy is more, here districts, here's some one-time money, use that to pay for things like this. Some of those cost drivers going up, but those are the percentages. There's a later slide where we'll see if there is any silver lining at STIRS costs going up, is that it plateaus next year. So it gets to 19.1, which 10 years ago, they said, hey, it's going to ramp up to this, and then it stays flat. So in terms of the multi-year projection, what makes it a little easier is there's not the year-to-year change. It's just now stays at a very large percentage. PERS continues to adjust year to year, and that just reflects the difference in those two systems. We're building in a budget with medical costs going up 10%. That's higher than our recent historical average, but there is some uncertainty there with COVID costs. You know, the former economics teacher, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So we see a lot of quote free COVID testing, or we can get 8 free COVID tests sent home, which is fantastic, right? But it'd be interesting to see where those costs then get recouped by some of these insurance providers down the road. What's going on with medical care? Was there not much? People were not going seeking providers during the pandemic, and now with in the second year of it, did people go to more office visits, or were taking care of some of those other costs? So we'll see what happens there. Unemployment insurance stays at 0.5%. That's what it is this current year. It's what it'll be next year, and then it steps down to 0.2%. Nobody really cares about unemployment insurance because it used to be 0.05%. It's not a typo, it literally was 0.05%. And then when 2020 hit and a lot of unemployment insurance claims were put in, that basically said, oh my gosh, we need to recoup the money and pay for these claims. And so it skyrocketed to 0.5%. You look at that 0.05 to 0.5% is a significant increase when you just look at that comparison. And then there's just additional one-time revenue. And then we always couple that with offsetting expenditures, but continued carryover funds. A lot of those can be spent through next school year, even into September of 2024. So we'll carry those funds with us. We've heard prior board meetings about the educator effectiveness grant. We have 5 years to spend that. That's about $1 million. And then the A through G success grant. I know Terry presented on that a couple board meetings ago, $500,000 to spend. So that is in the budget as well. So a lot of good things and opportunity to do things with those dollars. But we see all that baked into this budget.
I have one question.
Sure.
And that is to continue with existing programs, yes, but and staffing. We already just said we need 6 less certificated. But we really know already for sure that we won't need more or less classified or more or less admin or more or less wellness type of providers.
We know what we know today. And I'd say why we highlight the certificated one is that is more closely tied to enrollment. So a lot of those classified staff, although could be tied to enrollment, a lot of it's more of a fixed number, right? Enrollment grows, it decreases, but some of that, like number of custodians we have is more tied to the square footage and amount of space we have. We've talked about student conduct liaisons. Our campuses aren't any larger, but we do have more buildings and more students. So when's the tipping point where maybe add a staff there? And I think opportunity, if we need to expand other things with some of the one-time money coming, give us an opportunity to maybe examine that, right? And we do talk a lot internally too about additional people can help, but often additional people is more people to manage and track. And so what's the best way to provide the services to our students and staff? Sometimes that's more people, and sometimes that's just providing services in a different manner or referring out to outside providers. So it's something we'll definitely monitor. And in the last slide, when we look at next steps, it's that's always something we examine. I mean, even when school starts and we see how many students show up when we're starting an ELD program at Los Altos, and I'm looking at when Satterwhite in the audience, right? Starting with kind of a base level of staffing and then adjusting as needed, right? And seeing what the students are, the need is, and
we're having conversations weekly about, we know more students show up, especially in our ELD population. But in the last decade, we've only had a program at Mountain View. So when they show up next year, will they be assigned to Los Altos because they'll live in that area, or to Mountain View? And what's that new trend going to look like? And so, we're trying to be positioned to be able to respond appropriately and agile enough to do that. I know the school sites are building that into the master schedule, about anticipating some of that growth. So when the students come, there's not shuffling of the master schedule and disrupting periods and when they're offered, but really just adding students where they need to go to get those classes. Great, ask away. Multi-year projection assumptions. Again, this is just looking ahead. In fact, our fiscal services director, Elvis Lopez, and I were just wrapping up the multi-year projection today, so he can then do a lot of his detailed work in the budget software for the state. We do see enrollment continuing to decline. That's from our demographic study. So we're building that into the budget, but we really want to look at what enrollment happens this fall, right? So we have our projections, we have all the incoming ninth graders and their course requests, and how closely do we align with the numbers we already have on our student database in terms of that.
Okay, go ahead.
You can ask that question.
I don't know, go ahead.
With the email we got about the housing.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms. I'm happy to talk to you about that offline.
No, I have a question about it,
Yeah.
because well, anyway, but they sent some projections about what Mountain View Wisman projections are, and in terms of their declining enrollment, and it's much more significant. Right? Overall, I think it's around 16%. That's what they're saying. And so, is that? I guess, are these numbers? Do you know how they're associated with those? Do you have any? I mean, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to, so maybe that's information that can be shared with me, or maybe Dr. Meyer has it. Yeah, I will say, and I don't know who the they is that's sending it.
Silicon Valley at home. It has to be at home.
Silicon Valley Community
Got it.
Foundation. Yeah.
That helps. On response sites, so no, these numbers are still based upon the demographic study that we commissioned in 2016, updated in 2017. But we've been tracking very closely to that high. There's the most likely, and there's the high and the low. We've been tracking pretty well with the high mark. And so that's what gives me confidence in terms of continuing to use those numbers. Now, that was before we had a pandemic. That was before, there was maybe more adjustments in population and where people were moving. So we continue to use this. We're probably getting close to the next year or two. We're doing an updated demographic study and enrollment projections to do that. This is completely separate from any, discussions with the city of Mountain View and their housing element and 20,000 housing units. So that's like a different projection with a different solution and a whole nother agenda item for a board meeting. But the short answer is this really is just relying on that existing demographic study. And again, partly why we rely on it is because we have been tracking well with those initial projections, which took into consideration Mountain View Wisman. Then the second part of my answer is it's helpful to look at that partner district, but then combine it with Los Altos School District, right? Because those are our two partner districts that feed in and what's happening globally, across our high school boundaries for that.
So do you know anything about what LASD changes in enrollment?
I do not.
I think they're down about 10%.
And some of it to dig into that, and again, that's why it's good for us to talk with them, look at what grades those enrollment drops are in. Is you see this when you look at K-12 projections, but a lot of that is if it's in the kindergarten, first, second grade year, right? Those are based upon births and based upon new families moving to the area and whatnot, and so we sometimes have the advantage of time of seeing that coming. I remember being a site assistant principal, and the opposite. You saw this enrollment big boom coming, and you saw it, and it was like second, third grade, and then a few years later, it was in middle school, and we knew it was coming. And so we do have some benefit of, depending what grade they're seeing those enrollment drops, of anticipating, okay, when does that impact us at the high school level? So definitely worth a deeper dive in terms of looking at our year-to-year projections and fine-tuning that, and probably worth looking at a refresh or an update on that demographic study.
So quickly, Silicon
Yeah.
Valley at Home is meeting with various groups and suggesting that the solution to declining enrollment is more housing. And
Yeah.
anyway, I'll just leave it as that, but that's their general premise. But they are doing an interesting thing kind of
Sure.
across multiple entities to try to get them all to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I just thought of this question, so I don't want to put anybody in the spot that might not know this answer, but do we know what percentage of our enrollment incoming as freshmen or even in the higher grades is from private schools that have switched over to public in the high school?
I'm pretty confident, yes. And I say that because Ed Services does a great job of looking at that data by grade level, by feeder school, even feeder district and feeder school, and even private school placement. And there's a spreadsheet that I know Ed Services maintains and
I would love
updates.
to
So
see that too, because I wonder whether that has gone up or down comparatively.
yeah,
And I know anecdotal evidence that sometimes kids, they think their child, or somebody thinks their child needs a different kind of nurturing, maybe a parochial school or something in elementary school, but once they get to the high school, it's like, oh, you have all of your famous AP classes and, so we'll send the kids over there with all the facilities and so on we have.
yeah. We have two fantastic comprehensive high schools, and a lot of people say,
exactly.
that's where I'm going to send them because, I get everything I'm looking for. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm working the camera and the screen and the microphone all at the same time. You just see some, we'll provide more enrollment analysis, and I think that's great to continue that conversation and monitor that. In terms of our multi-year projection, secured property tax growth, again, if you remember, we're building an 8.5 next year. That steps down to 7 for our assumptions in 23, 24. That's really just a function of when it can decline, how quickly does it decline, how precipitous or not. And the trend data is that, when it goes down, it doesn't usually drop off except for 1 year, like 08, 09. And so 5% then being conservative on the out years. That's the hardest part of the multi-year projection, is that crystal ball of what's happening with property taxes. But why we're keeping that strong is just a reflection of the high property values and assessed valuation in our district, both the residential side, but also the commercial. You see articles about commercial real estate being purchased and developed and plans. People are coming back in the office, maybe in a hybrid setting or maybe not as frequently, but there's still an appetite for that commercial real estate, especially in Mountain View, Los Altos Hills. So those are our assumptions for revenue growth. You see CalSTRS, I mentioned, plateaus, CalPERS goes up and slightly in 23, 24, and then drops down in 24, 25, but the PERS board reviews that and sets that every year. So again, building in those drivers of costs. I referenced just a little over a week ago, May 13th, Governor Newsom shared his May revision to the governor's budget. He presents the budget in January, and then there's a lot of back and forth, and they revise it in May and have a press conference. I'm sure we've all heard state revenue is estimated to be a huge surplus, 55 billion higher than the January proposal. The January proposal showed a surplus. I think it's upwards of close to $100 billion total surplus, which is a good thing. And then there's just a lot of people asking for how to spend that surplus. We will see an increase in special education funding, which is outside of our secured property tax revenue, from going up to $820 per student. That actually comes to us through the county and the local SELPA. So we see that show up on a different revenue line, but we'll benefit from that. And then the last 2 bullet points of all the governor's May revision, because a lot of it was local control funding formula related, with which we're a community funded district. But there's a proposal for one-time discretionary dollars, $8 billion in total, spread across K-12 districts. School services estimates this at $1,500 per student. So do the math, $1,500 times an ADA of our district, conservatively call it 4,100 students, that's $6 million, over $6 million for MVLA. And I shared this in my weekly. Now that's the governor's proposal. There's a state proposal saying, let's make it more focused and categorical and have an equity component and look at unduplicated pupil count. So to be determined. That's why we don't include it in next year's budget, in our district budget. We wait for the state decide. We don't need that money to balance our budget. When they decide, then we incorporate it into our district budget, and we'll include that at first interim later in the fall. But that's on the horizon. Some form of this, I'm confident, will happen, whether it's the governor's proposal or modified, more restrictive form, remains to be seen.
You know, they increased herself, but they increased the budget for what they call it, extraneous or long-term type of care. Remember, there was a bucket of money, $6 million or something small.
Yeah, I remember that at a prior time I was up here, and it was like this little portion of the budget.
Yeah, we can all ask for it. It's distributed, like you said, by the county.
Yeah.
But like, so we have students that we end up paying because they're going to a private, place
Yes.
out of state.
Yeah. I've not heard anything specific about that. I can go back and look at more details, but I haven't heard anything about the extraordinary costs.
Extraordinary costs.
Extraordinary costs. Yep. Mhm.
I spoke with Superintendent Report right after that conversation and that question last time, and he said it does exist, but priority is given to school districts who are both have higher low income numbers, but it is something that not a lot of people are aware of. So it is there, and so we're continuing to talk about it, especially given those costs, regardless of your district's income, can limit.
I have one other question having to do with the discretionary. If it really is truly discretionary as opposed to category. Does that have to be spent on program or staff, or can that be, for instance, if we've spent down our reserves for some reason, or we want to give it a big bump for the moment because we've been having a goal for a while that we haven't quite made in terms of our reserve. Can we put it there instead or not? We stash away in our reserve.
Yeah. My understanding is yes, discretionary means discretionary. There's intent language that goes with it. Like, hey, this is the intent of this money is to spend on X, Y, and Z, but that doesn't bind you in the same way as law. And so the short answer would be yes, there's some broad discretion and flexibility with that money. There's been a lot of the phrase pulling a playbook from Governor Brown, a page from Governor Brown's playbook, right? He did this 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row. At one point, you're like, how many years of one-time money does it take before it's ongoing? But trying to be prudent with, hey, there's a surplus this year, but what about the out years? Let's not commit us to ongoing expenditures. So this is very much in that vein of that, and we received that in prior years. So it just remains to be seen how discretionary it will be, if that dollar amount still holds. So we'll stay tuned to that.
I'd just be careful. I mean, I see where you're going, Catherine, but I'd just be really careful because there's so much concern around the state about how education is spending all the money that they're getting, that if we were really to receive a big bucket like 6 million and drop it into reserves, even though we've had a long-term goal and we're trying to get there, I think that's a perfect example of the concerns around the state saying, okay, it's not going to kids this year, right?
Well,
It's
this
not-
year, but on the other hand, there's districts that have overspent or overcommitted, and then they're in a dire need a couple of years later. And if we go ahead and say, well, let's save some of it, not all of it, but some of it in that bucket. And in case we do need to give us different salaries or start a new program or something and need it a couple years down the road. That would be a good study session.
And I won't go longer on this, but I think this is a good time too to remember that the narrative statewide, the experience of most districts statewide, is declining enrollment. And if you're funded per student, then your revenue is decreasing. So there's a lot of conversations I'm going to mention here about changing the formula for ADA, a 3-year rolling average, basically to help soften that decline of enrollment and revenue. So, at the governor's level, they're saying, hey, you say STRS is going up, fine, we'll give you some extra money. This is to help pay for that increase in STRS cost. There's also some things, and I'm not an expert on the state budget, but the GAN limit, which we do every year for our district budget, the state has that limit, and how much can we spend? And if you're over that, it has to go back to taxpayers or in a certain buckets of money. So can we put money at some of these things to have it count as those other buckets so it doesn't go back to taxpayers? So there's a lot going on at the state level with this surplus and the legal requirements of that and how they're, I'd say, defining or coding or naming some of these initiatives. So that's all factored into this. You know, but there are a lot of districts that are suffering and hurting, and they're looking at their revenue and figuring out enrollment's dropping and revenue's dropping. What do we do to kind of, you know, spread out that decline, that fiscal cliff that I hear about when I go to those more statewide workshops. And then the last bullet point, which isn't a big part of our general fund budget, but is important for the conversations we've been having here, is our facilities, new construction, modernization. And so there is money being proposed to put in to fund school facility program projects at SFP that we talk about. And we've invested money to apply and be eligible for that. But there's not money because there's no state bond. And so we're waiting in line as with all these other districts. So this gives hope that there would be money sooner than otherwise. We have to wait for state bond to help fund all the applications that are in line. So again, we're not going to count the money till it comes in, but you know, some optimism about maybe seeing some of that money sooner than we previously thought we would for our projects that we've submitted the school facilities program eligibility items. So we're in line at least for one of our big projects. So, you know, there's a calculation, how the dollar value of everything in line, what's been allocated, how much is unfunded, what's still remaining. So that's another key part of the proposal that's important. And so can bring it to the local level, our district, obviously property tax revenue, we will monitor it, that impacts us. Enrollment, we already had a discussion of staffing. The shoreline EER JPA. So I acknowledge we're taking it down 10%, but as we look into next year, do we maintain what we have this year? Does it go down by more than 10%? Does it grow? That's going to impact our budget. Additional one-time funding we talked about, and then district interests for program enhancements as we look at the initiatives we talk about at the leadership level, the site level. Where are we serving kids well? Where do we need to enhance that? Where do we need to redirect our resources perhaps? That's always something that we're looking at in terms of how it's reflected in our budget and making sure our budget reflects the values and the goals of our district. So those will be things that we always continue to monitor. The budget is a working document, it's a plan. And our next steps are to incorporate funding changes from the May revision, which we've already started to do, because we developed the slide deck last week. So we've already incorporated some of those. We will finalize the budget documents, and those lovely standardized forms that the state has for us, including the multi-year projection. We'll be back June 2nd, along with Terry and Ed Services for the official LCAP and budget public hearing. Again, those go together and have so for the last 7 or 8 years. And then it's required to have a separate public hearing followed by formal adoption at June 23rd. That concludes this budget development overview. Again, intentionally high level, but kind of the big drivers, what we see developing for next year.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions for Mike at this time?
Ask them along the way.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Right. Moving on to board operations. Review of calendar of events. Our next meeting is June 2nd, which we changed all the June meetings by vote at previous meetings. So we have the June meetings are June 2nd and June 23rd, which are uncharacteristically on Thursdays. And then we don't meet in July. That's our month off, if you will. So then graduation's coming up, numerous graduations coming up. Dr. Meyer, do you want to mention any more of them, the graduations, or we all know what they are already and they're all on the calendar? Okay, anybody else want to bring up any other dates? All right. Communications correspondence?
Yes, I want to share, I'll pass it around, the flyer on the fentanyl presentation, so you can take a look. It will be at the Spartan Theater, and I hope the community can attend.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, all right, board suggestions for future meetings. Bill? No? Okay,
You have to register for this thing.
Yeah.
So,
This is on the website somewhere, probably?
It will be.
Yeah, great, okay. Okay, super.
end up with the, all right, date and time, all right, we just did date and time. All right, we do not need to resume closed section, so we don't need to reconvene for open session because we're already here. So I guess that means we call for adjournment. Would someone make a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? Deanna? Oh, Debbie, Sanjay,
I was trying
and
to point at
Debbie. Okay. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that is a 5-0 vote to adjourn. And I adjourn the meeting at 10:02 PM.